Return of the Mount Hua Sect. Chapter 221. Did you just say Mount Hua? Chung Myung, who had been silent for a while, lifted his head. Mister, I have something I'm curious about. Seriously, what are you? Looking at Chung Myung, the guard was stunned. You said it was your first time seeing people like us. No, it is just my first time seeing someone like you. No, this is the first time you're meeting me, and how dare you talk to me like this? Anyway, so, has there been a person from the Central Plains whom you've taken to the palace before us? You're asking such obvious things. What happened to them? The guard smiled. Have you ever heard of someone getting released after getting caught by us? No? You seem to know well. Then why are you asking? Chung Myung shook his head and then looked back. See that? It looks like everyone was probably killed. Please shut that mouth of yours, Chung Myung. The disciples of Mount Hua just wanted to enter the palace immediately at this point. Being locked up in such a small place with Chung Myung was horrible punishment. And fortunately, their wish came true. Open the gate! The front gate opened wide, and the cart carrying them entered the palace through the gate. Wow! The disciples of Mount Hua shed a sigh of relief. Numerous warriors were lined up in the wide place, and around them there were wild beasts prowling all around. The sight of humans and beasts living in harmony gave them a strange feeling. It was something that they hadn't experienced before. Isn't that a tiger? What kind of sane man will sit on a tiger? And isn't that a snake? Why would someone have a snake around their neck? Baekchun rolled his eyes. He had heard that the Nanman Beast Palace used wild beasts, but to live so comfortably with real beasts like these. Besides, the wild beasts here were twice as large as the ones they were familiar with. Don't be so surprised. One of the guards spoke coldly. Because soon we will feed you to one of those children. Why hadn't those words sounded strange? We will be fed. Ah, fed. So they don't get hungry, right? Chung Myung smiled. This is such a fun sight. If I had known this was the case, I would have visited the palace in advance. He wondered if he had wandered around the Central Plains too much in his previous life. Even while they were looking around, the guards gathered one after another. From the few dozens in the beginning, now there were hundreds of them. And the guards who had brought them here handed them over to the soldiers. There was no way that all the people of the palace who were responsible for looking after Yunnan had gathered here. That meant that the people here didn't represent the full power of the palace. Considering that, they could imagine just how huge the power of the Nanman Beast Palace was. As expected, Baekchun's face went stiff. Regardless of how strong each soldier here was, it was remarkable that there were so many people who had learned martial arts here. Even the Shaolin sect probably wouldn't have these many warrior monks. The cow that became frightened at the sight of all the wild beasts halted, and the guard opened the locked door of the cart and pulled out the disciples of Mount Hua. He then proceeded to drag them into the middle of the ground. Ah, gently! You'll break my wrist! When Chung Myung yelled that, the guard who was dragging him thought he was dealing with a crazy man. I've never seen someone so utterly fearless in my life. That temper of yours made me just wanna whack. What about my temper? What? Make you wanna go whack? Do you know what my temper is like? It's probably better to not know. He! As the guard continued to pull, the person behind him spoke coldly. Stop it. The palace lord will arrive soon. The guard shuddered at the word of his comrade. This reaction alone made it clear exactly how fearful their palace lord was. They dragged Chung Myung and his party to the center. Then they went back to their own groups and stood in perfect formations. They didn't take away their weapons, nor did they tie them up. What will they do if we run? They're probably telling us to try. Will we be able to cross the vast land of Yunnan and re-enter Sichuan avoiding all their eyes? Right. It would take them at least 10 days to go back the way they had come from, and escaping from the guards of the Nanman Beast Palace was no easy feat. And it doesn't seem like it'll be easy for us at all. Everyone here, they're all stronger than you'd think. The disciples of Mount Hua looked around with tense eyes. They observed the copper-colored armor on the bodies of the guards and their tightly covered muscles. They noticed their intense eyes. Contrary to the freedom one would feel from the name of the Nanman Beast Palace, everyone here seemed like a dignified soldier. That alone was daunting enough. But the wild beasts that roamed freely among them would occasionally show them their teeth and scare them. The sharp teeth of a tiger showed how wild it was. If we put that tiger in the Central Plains, you could easily imagine people calling it Mountain God, right? Can that even be considered a tiger? A bird the size of a man had been flying above us for a while now. I had no idea about that, but why is there a snake around his neck? Something felt odd. It wasn't like the enemy was strong enough to corner them completely, but the anxiety of facing something unknown took over them. The intensity of this weird feeling they felt here was incomparable to when they were in Yunnan and Kunming. Being here felt like they were in another world, and in that moment, with a sharp sound, a white object flew past them at the speed of lightning. What? The rushing object stopped just a step ahead of them. It was a marten that had pure white fur, and it seemed to be threatening them, looking at its hair standing up. Is that a spirit animal? It looks like a cat. What? Everyone looked at Chung Myung. Does this bastard not use his eyes? Come here. Don't do it. It'll bite your finger off. When Chung Myung squatted down and reached for the ferocious marten, Yunjong and Jogul tried to stop him, but Chung Myung was calm. Why? It's so obedient. It's so nice. Huh? Jogul and Yunjong rubbed their eyes. The white marten, which had its hair up until a second ago, was now licking Chung Myung's finger and was being embraced by him. It was like it was playing with him. It's docile. Did it feel something? With the way the animal was wagging its tail, it was now looking cute. Seems like it's really a spirit animal. It definitely must be precious. Even if it isn't presently, it is definitely a spirit animal. It is said that animals innately know whether a person was good or bad. And if a spirit animal was wagging its tail like this, how bad of a personality did Chung Myung have to suppress that innate sense? But thanks to that, they relaxed a bit. Chung Myung pushed it to Baekchun. Bite! Bite! Don't! Grr! Bite! Baekchun grunted. Why is this idiot making jokes even at this moment? I don't know if you're a great or a complete idiot. And at that moment, bang! The large door in front of them opened, and a man proudly walked out. Wow! Wow! In an instant, all the disciples of Mount Hua were overwhelmed by the sight they saw. They saw the thick arms and legs that seemed as though they had stones in them. They could see the pulsing muscles of the figure. He adorned an animal fur pelt that barely covered his huge body that seemed to be harder than any metal. He had long hair that was rough like hay and reached his shoulder. In summary, he looked exactly like a wild beast. People of the Central Plains. Baekchun shut his eyes as he heard the roar. Sometimes, the emotion of the speaker could be felt by the tone of their words. And in this single sentence, the hostility this man had towards them had been revealed. We took this place too lightly. If this was the amount of hostility they had, then their problem could never be solved. The palace lord grunted and shouted, "Who are you all? How dare you disguise your identity and come into our sacred land? Speak! If your answer doesn't satisfy me, I will tear you to shreds and feed you to the animals." The voice seemed to have the power to shake the world. Baekchun tried to cover his ears, but his hands wouldn't even move. What amazing strength! The lord of the Tang family had amazing energy, but this man's energy wasn't the least bit inferior to it. If anything, it was only better than that of the Tang family lord. Speak, you damned intruders. If you don't, I will tear you to pieces right away. The man's eyes gleamed. This wasn't an attitude that condoned excuses. This man was just looking for a justification to kill them all. What do we do? Cold sweat dripped down Baekchun's forehead. One wrong word could kill them all. It was then. We are from Mount Hua. All the disciples turned their heads towards the voice. Chung Myung took a couple of steps forward and scratched his nose calmly. We came here to find something. Can you help us? Yeah, idiot! Gulp. Even Yu Yisol failed to hold her composure and gulped in nervousness. Well, if they revealed it like this. Mount Hua! Did you just say Mount Hua? Yes, we are from Mount Hua. And surprisingly, a light shone in the palace lord's eyes. The Mount Hua that is known to be cursed by the 9 great sects. The Mount Hua from Shaanxi. You are the disciples of that place. The palace lord's face was distorted. His voice was twice as loud compared to before, and it was double the force. Mount Hua's disciples' legs faltered at the intense pressure they were facing. But Chung Myung didn't seem to be even the least bit worried about it and said, Yes, that Mount Hua. You. The man almost sprinted down the stairs and ran straight for Chung Myung. And then he stopped right in front of Chung Myung. The disciples of Mount Hua froze. The moment the palace lord stood in front of Chung Myung, they realized exactly how huge this man was. Chung Myung wasn't short, but his head only reached the chest of the palace lord. And the force emanating from this body was truly incredible. Just looking at him made their legs go weak, and the man spoke in a low voice. Mount Hua. It was a low voice, but it felt more threatening than before. The man, who was looking at Chung Myung like he wanted to tear the skin off his body, raised his arm. It was a movement that seemed like he wanted to smash the guy to the ground. Baekchun drew his sword, but before he could move, the arm descended and Baekchun screamed, No! But the hand, which should have smashed Chung Myung into the ground, was now suddenly grabbing him by the shoulder. And with a strong voice, the man asked, Then you are the descendants of the Plum Blossom Sword Saint? Huh? Why is my name being brought up here? For the day to come, when I meet the descendants of the Plum Blossom Sword Saint, the Nanman Beast Palace Lord welcomes the descendants of the Plum Blossom Sword Saint. His descendants deserve to be our guests. Because of me? But why? Prepare a feast. We have guests. Our guests have arrived. The Nanman Beast Palace Lord chuckled, and the others began to move in unison. Yunjung, who was watching it, looked at Baekchun. Just what kind of situation is this? How can I know? Just how? Chapter 222. How come you don't know that? Boom. Boom. The sound of battle horns echoed throughout the palace. Thud, 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 thud. And then came the sound of drums. And soon, all kinds of sounds could be heard from different instruments. Buried in the cacophony of the melody, Baekchun looked around with a blank face. Delightful. The people of the palace were holding instruments on either sides and playing them with smiles on their faces. And in the square where they had previously been, there were now dancers in loose clothing jumping around. Baekchun lowered his head. Seafood kept piling up in front of him, and each plate had dishes he had never even heard of. But the one thing they all had in common was that everything looked extremely delicious. Regardless of the scent or the color, he was seeing each and every one of these dishes for the first time in his life. The food seemed to be screaming, I have a great cook." He glanced around and saw the others looking as lost and clueless as he was. That's pretty obvious. If Baekchun himself couldn't understand it, how could the others understand what was happening? As if their thoughts were regarded to be irrelevant, loud laughter could be heard from the other side. "Eat a lot. Eat more. We weren't sure if the food of Yunnan would suit you at first." The palace lord laughed again. With each laugh, their ears trembled. Baekchun pressed his fingers into his ear to check whether his ears had started bleeding. Fortunately, he didn't see blood. "I have always wanted to visit Mount Hua, but I could not go to the Central Plains, so I had to wait patiently for an opportunity that allowed me to do so. But the disciples of Mount Hua and the descendants of the Plum Blossom Sword Saint have come here in person. This is the happiest day of my life. Oh my. Bring me alcohol." "Yes, my lord." "Peach extract. Bring out the peach extract. I need to treat the guests properly." "Yes, my lord." Some of the attendants rushed out of the room as soon as the order was given. The palace lord chuckled and looked at the disciples of Mount Hua in delight. However, the whole situation made the disciples of Mount Hua very uneasy. "I cannot even look at his eyes because of how scared I am. Why is everything so big here? Even the people are big. Why is his head that big?" Since they were all sitting together, they realized how huge the people of this place were. Although they had strong bodies due to Chung Myung's training, they felt they were all 3-year-old infants whose bodies could be crushed by anyone present here at any moment. Seeing them, the palace lord burst into laughter. Looking at the muscles that would pulsate along with each laugh, the disciples couldn't even hold their chopsticks properly. "Can I really eat all of this?" Well, all of the disciples except for one person. "You are asking such a natural thing. They have all been prepared for you." "Is the peach extract you talked about that delicious?" "It is the best drink in Yunnan. It isn't normally served to outsiders, however. Since only a small amount is brewed each time, it is a special drink reserved for special occasions, even for us. You can feel a heavenly scent each time you smell it." Chung Myung laughed like he was enjoying it. He calmly raised his chopsticks and began to gorge down the food. "Ah, this tastes quite unique. It is kind of strangely sweet, but also spicy. Everyone, try it." "Do you even care about the situation we are in?" They had thought that they understood Chung Myung to some extent. The disciples of Mount Hua, who collectively realized that their standards of appraising this man were too absurd, shook their heads. They could never understand this guy. In the meantime, the drink was served. They were served the drink in 5 pure white jade bottles. "You people! Didn't I tell you to bring the peach extracts?" It is the peach extract, my lord." "I meant all of them. Are you trying to disgrace me in front of the descendants of the great Plum Blossom Sword Saint? Do I need to cut off the veins in your throat to bring you back to your senses?" "But then they'll die. How would one get back their senses when they're dead?" However, the man just bowed and the palace lord yelled, "Bring them all right now!" "Yes, lord." "Right now!" "Yes, palace lord." The Nanman Beast Palace Lord looked at the servants with a frown and then turned his head at the disciples of Mount Hua. Suddenly, there was a soft smile on his previously wrathful face. "This is embarrassing. Guests of the Central Plains, please don't hate us too much." "Ah, what are you saying? You have given us food and drinks. You are such nice people." "I am a little temperamental too." The disciples of Mount Hua looked at the two with puzzled faces. What is all this? They had seen Chung Myung speak to many different people many different times, but it was their first time seeing him get along with an old man like this. "Here, let's have a glass." The palace lord gave Chung Myung a drink. The other person was just holding the bottle with one hand instead of two. And it was understandable why the Lord was angry at the sight of the 5 bottles. They simply wouldn't be enough for him. pour. He filled the cups of all the disciples with the peach extract. In an instant, its rich flavor hit their noses. Come on, take it. The disciples bowed their heads lightly to show their gratitude and drank it. And as soon as they did, everyone looked shocked. Wow! Oh my! They couldn't speak much after having it. Is it good? The name you have is perfect for it. Ah, you! Your young friend is a good talker. He knows how to make people feel good. The man patted Baekchun on the back with his huge hand. Baekchun felt his body turn into jelly. It was a hand that was patting him, but it felt like he was being hit by a horse carriage. Baekchun genuinely thought that his intestines would pop out. To think there would be such a day, to meet the descendants of the Plum Blossom Sword Saint. Jogul, who heard it, opened his mouth wide. But, it is a bit weird. Is the Plum Blossom Sword Saint famous in Yunnan? What? The palace lord's eyes shone with a dangerous light, despite the smile on his face. In Yunnan? What does that mean? Isn't the Plum Blossom Sword Saint a hero of this world? Huh? When Jogul asked this question, the man just asked something else again, unable to understand the reaction. No. Then you are saying that the people of the Central Plains do not know of the 5 heroes who eliminated the demonic sect. 5 heroes? This is my first time hearing about such a thing. What? The palace lord yelled out loud in shock, and everyone covered their ears. Why does a person from the Central Plains not know about the 5 heroes who eliminated the demonic sect? Without them, Yunnan and the Central Plains would have been full of the demonic bastards. Does this mean you people in the Central Plains do not even know about the grace the 5 heroes bestowed upon us? The palace lord screamed in anger. The force emanating from his body made the disciples of Mount Hua go stiff. It felt like a mountain had popped up in front of them, and Chung Myung, who was savoring the alcohol, said, "Ah, why are you mad at the kids?" Ah, right. I cannot be angry at the descendants of the Plum Blossom Sword Saint. The palace lord laughed and smiled. So, you are saying that you do not know of that? Yes. How can you not know the 5 heroes who made the most brilliant achievement in the war against the demonic sect? Then, how did you think the demonic sect bastards were defeated? Everyone in the Central Plains united. Those sympathy rip-off bastards. Those crumpled old idiots. Baekchun closed his eyes. In this world, there were normal people, Chung Myung, and people like Chung Myung. The problem now was that the 2 of the latter were in the same place. This is hell. At least it feels like it. The non-man beast palace lord, who thought for a moment, clicked his tongue. The 5 heroes who eliminated the demonic sect refers to the 5 heroes who showed the most dazzling form in the terrible war against the demonic sect. One of them is the Plum Blossom Sword Saint, your ancestor, and the other one was the throwing daggers Tangbo of the Sichuan Tang family, who was his close friend. The remaining 3. The man frowned and said, "I don't know who they are." Huh? What was that? At the beginning, the title of the 5 heroes was nothing more than a makeshift title made by people who were jealous of the Plum Blossom Sword Saint's bravery. So, they made it look like a collective effort. Therefore, you only need to remember the names of these 2 people. The man spoke proudly. The Plum Blossom Sword Saint defeated the demonic sect. Goosebumps rose on the skin of the disciples as they heard that. They had never thought that they would hear this from anyone other than someone from Mount Hua. No, they never heard it even in Mount Hua. A moment of great emotion came over them. Baekchun tilted his head. Why? Why is that idiot puffing up his chest? What is with that face? Why do you look so happy? The other disciples were looking at the palace lord, so they didn't see the expression on Chung Myung's face. The Plum Blossom Sword Saint did. Are you saying you don't know about this? We did hear that he was one of the best masters in the world, and that he had done a great job during the war too. But it was just that. What? One of the best masters? You idiot! The palace lord looked furious again. What kind of madman would refer to the Plum Blossom Sword Saint as one of the best? He was the best in the world. Even those demonic bastards used to run with their tails behind their legs at the mention of his name. How dare people refer him with such low titles? Ahem. Chung Myung, I will hit you. But why do you keep doing that? Everyone in the world was saved by him, even outside Yunnan. When those cruel demon sect people came for Yunnan, the damn Central Plain bastards changed their attitude and turned away from us. We ended up on the brink of extinction. But thanks to the Plum Blossom Sword Saint, the demonic bastards who had been eyeing Yunnan retreated. Ah. Baekhyun nodded his head. After listening to this, he could understand why the Nanman Beast Palace and the other sects of Yunnan were hostile to the Central Plains and friendly to the Plum Blossom Sword Saint. And it isn't that. It was the Plum Blossom Sword Saint who came all the way to Sichuan and annihilated those bastards. And when they divided and tried to attack Yunnan, he protected Yunnan as well. Oh, if it weren't for him, the Nanman Beast Palace would have been destroyed long ago. So how could we not favor him? To see such a saint appear from among those wicked people was like seeing a dragon emerge from a muddy river. Ah, that is why. Right. This is why we, the Nanman Beast Palace, made a shrine for the Plum Blossom Sword Saint and offered ancestral rites to him every year. If we don't show him grace, despite all that he did for us, we would be worse than bugs. He was someone who loved their Yunnan so much. How can we ever forget that? Hearing those words, Chung Myung felt warm inside. I have no idea what you are saying. If there was a fight, he fought. If there were demonic sect people, he would run after them and stop them. What did he say? I saved Yunnan. Right. If you say I did, I must have. There was some misunderstanding, but he didn't feel the urge to correct it. Even when he was defending Yunnan alone, the people of the Central Plains asked him to come back to Sichuan. The eyes of the palace lord were constantly changing as they became emotional while reiterating the story. The Mount Hua disciples, on the other hand, were very excited. Ah, that happened. As expected from the Plum Blossom Sword Saint. Only Chung Myung tilted his head. What was that? He never did that. Ah, Dao's Tiong. Those bastards have appeared in Sichuan. Let's go. Let's go and break their heads. But the commander is telling us not to go? Is that so? Then we definitely need to go. Who is he to give us orders to not fight them? Let's go. Yes. Huh? Was it that one time? As expected, people use their minds in the kindest way. The palace lord smiled and continued. Of course, he is respected as a saint, but he is also someone who needs to be respected as a warrior. He ascended the heights of the sky and made the evil bastards tremble at the mention of his name. His achievements are so dazzling that they cannot be put into words. Ahem. Baekhyun turned and looked at Chung Myung once again. The Plum Blossom Sword Saint. Kah! He is dazzling. My! We should never forget the grace he showed us. Oh! This is insane. No, he had always been insane, but now he is totally gone. Every time the palace lord praised the Plum Blossom Sword Saint, this bastard would twist his body and make weird noises. So how can I not treat the descendants of the great man kindly? You are the only ones from the Central Plains who are treated as guests in Yunnan. So, rest and enjoy yourself. Yunnan welcomes you. The man shouted loudly. What are you waiting for? Eat and drink and enjoy yourself. You are all precious people who have come to us. Yes, my lord. Seeing the place turn noisy, Chung Myung smiled warmly. There is someone who knows of my greatness. This is why people should live a good life. Right, Sect Leader Sahyong? Chapter 223. How come you don't know that? The Plum Blossom Sword Saint. He is so great. Of course, that man is the pride of Mount Hua, but it is only within Mount Hua that he is so famous. In other places, he isn't regarded highly. Even when we met the Wudang sect disciples, hadn't they joked around saying that Wudang was the best? Mount Hua's pride. And that person was being recognized as the pride of Yunnan. Baekchun reached out, grabbed his glass, and gulped it down. Ah! Its fragrance spread throughout his mouth, and his mind felt relaxed. It was difficult to suppress the pride that was rising up his chest. When had Mount Hua ever been recognized this much? Baekchun was a disciple of Mount Hua after all. How could he not feel happy when his ancestor was being recognized this much? But calm down. People make mistakes when they feel extremely happy. This was the Nanman Beast Palace. No matter how friendly they were now, things could always change. Then, it was the moment when Baekchun tried to speak. Let's drink some more. Chung Myung was chugging down the peach extract. Baekchun's face darkened. In front of the palace lord. He was acting like this in front of the palace lord. Yeah, the side dish is delicious. I think I might get drunk today. Hot-blooded young man. I like you. Have as much as you want. You, bring out more extract. More and more. Don't hold back. My lord. He spoke in a way that a mere servant couldn't dare say anything back, but the servant still tried his best. We brought out all the extract in the warehouse. Huh? Then bring the ones from the treasury too. There must be 2 more boxes in there. That is for the palace lord's grandson's wedding. You idiot! Kwang! The palace lord slammed the table. The table rose into the air and fell back down. In the meantime, Chung Myung grabbed onto the bottles to make sure none of them spilled or broke. Baekchun, who saw that, sighed and closed his eyes. He wasn't sure if he was supposed to admire the tenacity of the table, which flew into the air and withstood the abuse of the palace lord. No, more than that, he admired the feat of the drunk bastard holding on to all the bottles without spilling anything. The descendants of the Plum Blossom Sword Saint have come, and you're talking about some marriage. But, what? His eyes looked red. You idiot! Don't we make an offering to the shrine of the Plum Blossom Sword Saint every year? Yes, he is our hero and saint. And if we don't treat these people wholeheartedly, what would he say to us when we meet in the afterlife? Shouldn't we hear something nice when we meet? Ah! Chung Myung nodded his head. Only he knew that they weren't treating the descendants of the Plum Blossom Sword Saint, but the Plum Blossom Sword Saint himself. Sure, things were a little strange, but what about it? It was better to treat him than his descendants, right? And if the palace lord died and came to find out about who Chung Myung really was, he would feel even prouder. Now go and bring it, right now. Yes, palace lord. In the end, the servant couldn't win, and the palace lord laughed. It must have been unsightly. It was, but you were amazing. Huh? Is that so? You, the more we talk, the more I like you. Me too. I like the palace lord too. Let's have a drink. Chung Myung held the bottle and handed it to the palace lord, and then he picked up a full bottle. Oh, a full bottle. Right. A man has to be able to hold his alcohol. You certainly know how to hold your drink. Ah, I'm well versed in all kinds of Tao too. What? Right. Good. Where else can we see a Taoist drink? Then, they both began to drink at the same time. The disciples of Mount Hua couldn't smile nor cry at this sight. They just kept watching it dumbfoundedly. Am I seeing things right? It looks like an interaction between old friends who were separated and then reunited after a long time. This bastard should have been born in Yunnan. Unable to continue seeing the two drink and laugh, Baekchun spoke. But Palace Lord, The man turned to him. Baekchun was a bit startled by his huge eyes, along with the imposing size of his body and the rough breathing. Nevertheless, he continued. Was everything you said really true? About the Plum Blossom Sword Saint? Yes, Palace Lord. Is the disciple of Mount Hua really asking me that? Ah, don't be angry. Right. The Palace Lord laughed again. Of course, I haven't seen him in action. But whatever I've told you now is known not just to the former Palace Lord, but the whole of Yunnan. But if the Plum Blossom Sword Saint was really as great as the Lord says, why is this rarely talked about in our place? Puck! The man smashed the bottle he was holding, and the disciples all flinched. Regardless of whether it was his actions, his words, or anything he did, their hearts would race every time he did something. The man shouted. His roaring voice made their ears hurt all over again. Because those damn moths made it that way. The man pounded his chest, indicating his displeasure. History is only written when people talk about it. History doesn't just tell us what happened. It only becomes history when what happens is actually reported. His emotions could be clearly understood. He looked at Baekchun with a face of regret. I heard that the situation on Mount Hua isn't good. Normally, Mount Hua should have told you. Fortunately, we have ancestors who did a good job speaking about what happened. However, Mount Hua lost its name, its fame, and even the people within it, which in turn made it lose the power to speak about it. The Peace Palace Lord grabbed the wine and opened the lid as he gulped it down. So it wasn't talked about. History belongs to winners. If there is no winner to speak the truth, then the next one will take the credit. If the Central Plains and Yunnan hadn't cut ties with each other, this would have never happened. It is all because of those bastards in the Central Plains. Those fucking bastards who live off the dead. Excuse me. Sorry, but we are from there too. But I don't want to say it because I shake at the sight of you. Right now, the Palace Lord was angry on behalf of Mount Hua. It isn't just that. It is a debt. It was obvious to Chung Myung that even though he played a significant role in the war and finally made the incredible contribution in killing the Heavenly Demon, the Central Plains didn't leave the already ruined Mount Hua alone. Normally, it was impossible for the sects to negotiate and turn away from the person they were indebted to. But since there was no one of importance in Mount Hua who had survived the war after the main task was done, the debt wasn't immediately enforced. So, an agreement would have been made to get rid of the debt itself and make it look like they owed nothing to Mount Hua. The world is still the same as ever. But if there was one, just one person, shouldn't we repay the kindness Mount Hua showed to us? If just one said person had said that, things would have been different. But such a person didn't exist. Chung Myung smiled. But what could you expect? Gang Ho had always been ruthless. Those who knew that would realize that having a shrine for him was unusual. With a bitter smile, the Palace Lord spoke. The war took away so much. If the Plum Blossom Sword Saint hadn't been taken away during the war, the history of Gang Ho would have proudly recognized Mount Hua. That man went so far, but Mount Hua didn't receive what it deserved. Baekchun closed his eyes. Once again, he could see how great the existence of the Plum Blossom Sword Saint meant to Mount Hua. He never realized how great the ancestors of Mount Hua were. And that forgotten history was welcoming them in a distant land, in Yunnan. Both the Nanman Beast Palace and Mount Hua lost too much in that war. And we are still trying to heal our wounds from then. The man filled his cup and then filled the cups of the disciples. Have it. This is the alcohol given to you as a person in a similar situation. It isn't a drink given by the Palace Lord, but a drink given by a colleague who shares the same heartbreaking history. The disciples who received it held the glass with both hands and gulped it. They looked at the empty cups for a second in thought, and the man continued. The world is heartless. You must have been through a lot. Not at all. Chung Myung spoke as he gulped the drink. His bottle was placed on the table with a thud. It is weirder to think you'll be rewarded for all the work that you've done in a place like Gangho. It wouldn't have been like this if those bastards had been rewarded something. Yeah, those bastards are our ancestors. Yeah, them. Yeah, idiot. Fine. Chung Myung scratched his head. I cannot tell them that I am the bastard. Then what should I call myself? Chung Myung smiled and continued talking. Anyway, the past is past. What can we do at this point, screaming about the unfairness of the past? It's already over. The important thing is the present. We just need to make sure that the current Mount Hua is the best. Then, in time, our past will have to be recognized. History belongs to the winners after all. The palace lord looked at Chung Myung and he smiled. Yes, that it is. With a low voice, he reached out and patted Chung Myung on the back. The more I listen to you, the more I like your words. You are indeed the descendants of the Plum Blossom Sword Saint. That single gesture of his didn't simply praise the Plum Blossom Sword Saint, but was infinitely close to sending the man back into the underworld all over again. Chung Myung even thought that his body had been made this strong so that he could survive the touch of this man. Ah, right. The palace lord looked at Chung Myung again and asked, But I forgot to ask, why did you come all the way to Yunnan? Getting here from Shaanxi couldn't have been an easy journey. Ah, right. I was meaning to tell you. Is there anything called the purple woodgrass here? Purple woodgrass. The man tilted his head. It is my first time hearing about this. You are sure about that? Chung Myung frowned. If this man didn't know of it, then they had a problem. Don't look at me like that. I am the lord of the Beast Palace, but I cannot know everything in Yunnan. Besides, I am not the kind to care about such things. Ah, right. There is no way someone interested in building such huge muscles could show interest in grass. Don't worry. I will have my subordinates find it right away. Good. The Plum Blossom Sword Saint descendants have come, so how can we not at least do that? Stop worrying and drink more. Today is a good day. Come on. Chung Myung and the palace lord lifted the bottles once again and began to gulp it down. Seeing the resemblances, Baekchun sighed again. I heard there is always one person who resembles another. Of course, it wasn't exactly the same, but he never imagined he would see someone else even remotely resembling Chung Myung. Well, at least things are going great, thanks to him. This young disciple has a strong body. Even the palace lord has a strong body. What? The palace lord held the bottle again. Come on, let's end this today. Won't you be embarrassed to lose in front of your subordinates? I never lose when it comes to alcohol. It's the same with me. Drink. Yes. And the drinks began to vanish extremely quickly. The disciples of Mount Hua also finally eased up and began to drink in peace. It wasn't polite when they were the guests here to constantly refuse their host. So, the Plum Blossom Sword Saint. Yeah. But the disciples of Mount Hua couldn't participate in the conversation at all. Chapter 224. How come you don't know that? I drank too much. Jogul lifted his head and looked up at the sky. It was late into the night, so the sun would soon rise. The feast hosted by the Beast Palace Lord went on until late in the morning. To be precise, it was the betting match between the Palace Lord and Chung Myung that extended until dawn. Who won? How can I even know? Unwilling to drink any more, the rest of the disciples left the two of them and went back to their rooms. The disciples of Mount Hua decided to unpack their luggage in the rooms assigned by the Beast Palace attendants who were leading their weary bodies. It would be better if he didn't wake me up till lunchtime. He must have had a lot to drink. After washing his face at the well and wiping it off, Jogul staggered to his room. Inside, Yoonjung was cleaning his bed and then proceeded to open the window and looked out the room. Won't you sleep, Sayoung? I will. Yoonjung turned away from Jogul after a light reply. Do you have any concerns? Rather than concerns, Yoonjung smiled. It was ridiculous to even ask if he had any concerns after coming all this way to Yunnan and entering the Nanman Beast Palace. No matter how much they were welcomed, this was a place where they couldn't relax. However, Yoonjung knew why Jogul was asking him this question. Girl. Yes, Sayoung. I'm sorry. It is because of me. What are you talking about? Sayoung. Jogul was shocked. Aren't we past all that? The things we went through before. Everyone would have died because of me. Yoonjung's face went stiff. If something had really gone wrong, Chung Myung would have solved it. That's the problem. Huh? Yoonjung shook his head. Because Chung Myung was there, we got out of that situation. We might have thought it all worked out. We should be of help to him, not a burden. But in the end, I became a burden, right? Sayoung. I was stupid. I will never do that again. I'm sorry. No, Sayoung. Jogul sighed. His heart knew that no matter what he said, Yoonjung wouldn't feel right. But why did you do that? It was my first time seeing Sayoung like that. Yoonjung bit his lip. He looked like he was deeply thinking about something and took a deep breath. Did you know that I was an orphan? Yeah, I heard about it. Then you know I was a beggar, right? Huh? Jogul was shocked. Yoonjung looked at him and calmly continued. Since I could remember, it had been just my mother and me. I had no relatives or acquaintances, so after my mother died, I had no choice but to become a beggar. Sayoung. It's still pretty vivid to me. On that cold winter day when I was dying on the street with no one to help me. What is funnier was that at that time, I suffered more from hunger than the cold. I hadn't eaten for more than 10 days, so I would have even killed people for food. If it wasn't for me being a kid, I would have turned into a thief or maybe even a murderer. Jogul went silent. This was his first time hearing about Yoonjung's past. And it was his first time listening to Yoonjung speak this freely instead of following the duty of a Sayoung. If the elder passing by hadn't saved me, I would have died on that road. Mount Hua is my benefactor. I was raised from a young beggar who is dying on the street to the man I am today by Mount Hua. Yoonjung shut his eyes. It was unclear whether he was trying to remember the past or organize his thoughts. Jogul didn't interfere and waited for Yoonjung to speak. Since then, whenever I see people starving, it reminds me of my past. Maybe it's because I know how hard and painful it is. I cannot help myself. The feeling of pain from the hunger that threatens to kill you. I understand, Sayoung. You understand? Yes, Sayoung. You understand, even if my actions brought you so close to death. Would you have been able to tell me that you understand if we had met after our deaths? Sayoung. Yoonjung spoke firmly. It was a stupid thing to do, helping people who I knew nothing about, especially when the safety of my Sasuks and Sages was dependent on me. There was deep regret on Yoonjung's face. Because of him, things had gone wrong, and he felt that he couldn't face them at all. Yoonjung licked his lips. As soon as I get back to Mount Hua, I will ask the elders to punish me. I will get back the Plum Blossom Sword again. But what excuses can I make after what I have done? Jogul heard the man speak with a dreadful voice and waved his hand. Sayoung, even if I didn't know what you were talking about, I'm sure they wouldn't punish you for selling the sword. Why? Well, the Plum Blossom Sword is the sword of Mount Hua, but it isn't a holy object of Mount Hua. Jogul cleared his voice. If Chung Myung heard you, he would have said something like this. What? Punishment? Depressed? If you think the sword is a holy thing, then the robes with the plum blossom should be holy things too, right? If we put plum blossoms on an alcohol bottle, would that be a holy thing as well? Jogul looked at Yunjong and smiled. None of those things matter. What is important is how Sa-hyung thinks about Mount Hua. Yunjong smiled bitterly. It wasn't because he was convinced by Jogul's words, but because he understood what he was trying to say. Wouldn't Chung Myung say that? It isn't about us making mistakes, but our ability to learn from them. And hasn't Sa-hyung learned anything? Yes, I've learned. Then it all worked out, right? Yunjong sighed and closed his eyes. Are you okay? Open your eyes. Elder. He remembered the sight of Hyunsang holding him. He remembered the warmth he felt. Sorry. Stop thinking about it and just sleep. There is a lot of work to do. Just think about finding the grass and returning back to Mount Hua. Right. Yunjong nodded his head. He lay on the bed, closed his eyes, and tried to sleep. But it wasn't easy. Suddenly, he heard a voice. Sa-hyung. What Sa-hyung did was wrong. Right. Still. I like Sa-hyung because you're such a person. Sleep now. The room turned quiet. Yunjong shut his eyes tightly, but he couldn't sleep until the morning. Alive. Seems to be dead. No, he seems to be breathing. The disciples of Mount Hua gathered around Chung Myung and watched him sleep. Jogul stabbed him with a stick he had picked up earlier. Dead? Must have died. If he was alive after having this much, he wouldn't be human. There is a limit to how much food and alcohol a person's stomach can fit inside it. Does it make sense for a single person to eat and drink so much? I heard that the man was saving it for a wedding. Alcoholic. As Jogul stabbed Chung Myung again, he wobbled in his sleep. He is alive. He never follows the path of the Tao and even took the Palace Lord down with him. So, who won? It was then. Oh! A terrible groan came from the mouth of Chung Myung, who was lying face down. I won. Sleep. You did well. Right. Yes. You can die now that you've won. I'm not dead. Chung Myung got up very slowly and sat straight. Cold water. Our sect has to be top class. A sasuk offering a sajil water. Baekchun held out the cold water he had prepared in advance, and Chung Myung drank it without saying another word. Then he grabbed his head. My head. At this point, just burn away the toxins. You've done that before. If that's the case, then why drink alcohol? Right. You said the same thing before. A sigh escaped from Baekchun's mouth. There was no way he could scold this man when he was looking this gloomy. But you did a good job. The best way to build a friendship was through drinking, and the position of the Palace Lord was absolute in Yunnan. I don't know if he drank with that intention or if it was purely for the purpose of enjoying it. But, in any case, it is certain Chung Myung is now friends with the Palace Lord. Ugh, it hurts! Chung Myung shook his head a couple of times, and a guard of the palace rushed inside. Are you awake? It was a completely different attitude from yesterday. The guard was polite and bowing to them. It was natural, now that they were guests who had been recognized by the Lord. Yes, the Lord is looking for you. What? Chung Myung asked. Already so alert. Weren't you drunk a moment ago? Baekchun's lips twitched. I think Chung Myung lost. It couldn't be. Loser. Baekchun smiled and followed the man. He had lived this long and could now witness Chung Myung lose. Life looked a little fun for Baekchun now. It cannot be. Baekchun's happy eyes changed in a fraction of a second when he saw the palace lord. Sitting in front of them in a giant chair and with a tiger skin draped around his body was the vigilant palace lord. No, he wasn't vigilant anymore. Ugh! How much did those two drink? The man looked like he would need the heavens themselves to come down and support him if he wanted to walk. His eyes looked dark and emotionless, and his cheeks looked like he had a disease that sucked them in. He groaned and managed to speak. Ugh, are you fine? I'm fine. Today too, I'll drink. Drink. The disciples of Mount Hua rushed to Chung Myung and covered his mouth. Don't puke, you idiot. Where do you think this is? Hold back. Bucket. Get us a bucket. The palace lord looked at that and smiled. Right. You cannot be fine after all that. Palace lord, you cannot puke again. Here. It was a mess. Unable to bear it any longer, one guard shouted, If you feel unwell, control your body. What? You idiot! If that is the case, why would I drink alcohol? Baekchun, who heard it, smiled. I feel like I've heard that somewhere. Am I mistaken? Has to be, Sasuk. Both participants of the bet were struggling to even move. They wiped their lips as they looked up at each other. If this is the case, a draw. The match between the two last night had been settled because they had run out of alcohol. They decided that they would have to reach a conclusion the next day because neither of them wanted to lose to the other. That is great. You! The disciples of Mount Hua laughed as they saw the two dreadful-looking men giving each other a thumbs up. They get along well. There seems to be something in common between them. This is horrible. Those were their thoughts. The life of the palace lord couldn't have been very happy either. Seeing that the lord was also similar to their brat, they felt a kind of sympathy and compassion for the scary man. But why summon us in the morning? Ah, right. The palace lord set the bucket aside and said, The grass you were asking about. Yes. It seems that the guy I asked to help had inquired about it to the merchants, and one of them has come through with some information. Ah, that was quick. The people of Yunnan are quick and accurate. Watching the two of them laugh, the disciples sighed again. Anyone who saw the scene would think that the two of them had known each other for 20 years. Fortunately, after a while, the door opened and the merchant came in. I greet the Lord, the son of Yunnan. Get rid of all that pretentiousness. You know of the purple woodgrass. The man didn't even give the merchant time to speak. The merchant, who was already familiar with the Lord's behavior, immediately brought up the topic in question. The purple woodgrass is what it is called in the Central Plains. In Yunnan, we call it the divine spirit grass. What? His voice was loud. Did you say the divine spirit grass? Yes. You said they are here to find the divine spirit grass. The palace lord's eyes widened. The force his voice had lacked returned right away. No, what is this? Is that something amazing? Chung Myung, not liking the Lord's reaction, asked. No, it isn't amazing. Okay. Hadn't they said that it was an item that used to reach the Central Plains in the past? If it was a great item, then such a trade wouldn't have happened. But the palace lord had a troubled face. He scratched his head and said, what does this mean? Is there some problem? At Chung Myung's question, the palace lord sighed. Do things have to get this messed up? First of all, the purple woodgrass you spoke of definitely exists in Yunnan. But the palace lord shook his head. No, simply saying this wouldn't help you. Follow me. I will guide you to the place where the divine spirit grass is. The Lord jumped up from his seat. Seeing that large man move gave them trust. Follow me. Bucket! Bucket! And that trust disappeared right away in no time. Chapter 225. How come you don't know that? Looking at the marten with his hair standing up in front of him, Chung Myung smiled. Sit down. Tap. The animal that had been trying to threaten them with its hair up put its butt on the floor as soon as he said those words. Come here. Shh. He held the marten in one hand and it began to move immediately. It wiggled its front paws and twisted its body repeatedly. Then, the marten turned its body and showed its stomach to Chung Myung. The image of the creature looked a lot cuter now. I feel bad for it. Can't it see that Chung Myung is like a Grim Reaper? It must be desperate to live, right? But to others, the sight looked depressing. At the same time, the palace lord, who was busy puking, calmed himself and said, Weird. Our Beck usually does not like foreigners. Beck? It is the name of the marten. It is from the word Baekjeon. Baekjeon? Baekjeon. Baekjeon? Thanks a lot, you crazy bastard. Baekjeon's face turned red. It doesn't like to follow other people and is quite a ferocious guy. Ah, right. It has to be. And our Beck is very picky with people too. Sometimes, I don't understand why it acts the way it does. You know it quite well. Yunjong and Jogul grabbed the hands of Baekjeon, who was trembling now. If it hadn't been for them, Baekjeon would have jumped Chung Myung by now. Calm down, Sasuk. Isn't Sasuk the one who said that we needed to get this done? Baekjeon shook his body loose. It isn't the palace lord that I want to fight. That bastard there is my target. That bastard is bringing in the marten and scoffing at other people. Chung Myung grabbed Baekjeon by the neck and put it on the ground. Baekjeon, who glanced at him, slowly moved away. The beast palace lord was genuinely admiring it. The animals of the beast palace are all good children. It is said that animals can recognize the goodness in people. Looking at what just happened, you seem to be a good person. Well, I am a Taoist. The mouths of the Mount Hua Sect's disciples went wide as they heard those words. Weren't they right to be surprised at the shamelessness of Chung Myung, who claimed to be a Taoist? Or even at the Beast Palace Lord, who was coolly accepting it? Anyway, both of them are weird. I want to go home. But do you really need to raise something that has such a temper and doesn't even listen well to you? That may be right, but he is a good one among the spirit creatures here. Even a tiger wouldn't walk in front of it. That sounds impossible. Sometimes size isn't everything. The palace lord had said something misleading, considering his own size. Now, the disciples of Mount Hua tilted their heads at the gigantic man. Enough. Let's go. Yes. Chung Myung, who was following them until then, turned back and then shouted, Let's go, Beck. You bastard. Be patient, Sasuk. He isn't talking about Sasuk. Baekjeon groaned, not liking anything about the whole situation, and followed the palace lord quietly. Actually, even if the others hadn't stopped him, what could he have done in front of the beast palace lord? That made him even angrier. As they crossed the square courtyard, the guards rushed and bowed their heads as they saw the lord. My lord, lord, where are you going? The beast palace lord proudly said, The divine pond. Divine pond? The eyes of the shocked guards shifted to the disciples of Mount Hua following their lord. Baekjeon's expression went stiff as he saw that. It doesn't seem like the divine pond is a normal place. Isn't that why they are looking at us like that? If it is a place where outsiders aren't allowed. Did the guests commit some kind of big mistake? To take them to the divine pond? Huh? What? All of the guards seemed curious and doubtful. The disciples of Mount Hua didn't turn away and looked at them, wondering what their looks meant. The beast palace lord cried out in anger. Some mistake? Is that the only reason to take people there? But, my lord, the divine... Do I not know that? When he yelled, the guards bowed right away. No, my lord, we were so foolish in our actions. When the palace lord clicked his tongue, Clearly displeased at it, the guards immediately retreated back. This is so strange. Once again, they saw that the Beast Palace Lord was the ultimate power here. Judging from the looks of the guard, he was of the age of an elder in Mount Hua, yet he couldn't speak up to this man. Of course, Hyunjung was the sect leader who was favored by the others in his own way, but it was no exaggeration to say that their sect leader couldn't stand in front of this man. Even the Tang family wasn't like this. It wasn't known if this was a feature of the Beast Palace or of Yunnan entirely, but it seemed like here, the Palace Lord had full power. That power exceeded what a sect leader had back in Yunnan. Get out! The Palace Lord stepped forward and the guards retreated. The guards near the front of the gate opened the gate immediately. Long live our Lord! Please move with caution. Seeing the people bow down so low, Yunjung clicked his tongue. It seems like it is true that the Palace Lord is the king of Yunnan. Right. The Nanman Beast Palace must have such a system. Rather, it looks more advanced than what happens in our sects. It was Baekchun who said that, and a muffled voice was heard. It isn't. Chung Myung clasped his hands behind his head and said, I've never heard any report of the Beast Palace Lord being treated like this. On the contrary, I've heard that the rulers here change very often. Then why? That's obvious. Who would want to fight him after seeing those muscles? Baekchun looked at the back of the Palace Lord. It looked like the man could carry a mountain on his back. No, was that what he was hinting at? It looked like the god of mountains was moving. Thanks to his exposed upper body, each step he took made the muscles in his back and his shoulders twitch. In addition, there was the hasty nature and loud screams that they noticed from the Palace Lord. No, I don't want to die. Wouldn't we die faster if we just hung our neck? Now they knew why the people were so loyal to this man. Chung Myung looked at the Palace Lord and said, Mount Hua should be like this too. You, don't say weird stuff. Don't ruin my Mount Hua. It would look so good. However, no matter what the disciples of Mount Hua said, Chung Myung seemed impressed with the Palace Lord. At the sight of Baekchun's fellow disciples trembling, his concern for the future of Mount Hua grew greater. Come on! Yes! At the words of the Beast Palace Lord, everyone moved fast. Their footsteps became muffled as they headed into the vast forest beyond the palace. This can be called a jungle. It's so dense with trees. We rarely see this around us. It sounds like we need to head through this place to get to the Divine Pond. But what kind of place is it for them to react like that? The Palace Lord, who heard it, spoke normally. It is a sacred place in our Beast Palace. What? It is as I said. It is both a sacred and forbidden place. It is considered sacred to us and forbidden for those without access. Usually, no one sets foot inside it apart from us. So that's why. But you aren't outsiders. Outsiders have usually heard about this place. What? Baekchun tilted his head. What is this now? As I said, that place is sacred to us, so no one but us can set foot in it. But it doesn't matter, even though you people are not of our palace. Don't you normally prevent outsiders from entering such sacred places? Is there any need to? If we start to prevent entry, then we have to prevent the entry of animals walking around too. But animals and humans are different. They aren't different. The Beast Palace Lord shook his head. In the end, humans are just smarter animals. You people seem to think that we care for the animals and raise them amongst us. I've heard such things, but that is quite wrong. Our palace doesn't care for animals alone. We just don't think that we are much different from them, so we can live together without problems. Baekchun nodded in admiration. And if we don't stop animals, we won't stop people either. If we say it is a sacred place, would it be sacred for all? So, it is part of nature. We don't expect others to accept it as a sacred place just because we consider it to be. Then what if it is damaged? What will change? The Beast Palace Lord smiled. A sacred place is a sacred place. Whatever it looks like, it will be sacred for us. Just because someone damaged it, it doesn't mean it isn't a sacred place. This is just the persistence of those who do not understand the concept of something being sacred. Whatever form it holds, it will be sacred. Ah, Baekchun was memorized by those words. Surprisingly, there was deep meaning in his words. He surely is great. One cannot obtain the seat of a lord with just physical strength alone. Baekchun thought that, despite his appearance, this man was deep and wise. However, Chung Myung tilted his head as if he wasn't very impressed with his words. Then does it have to be called sacred? Ah, right. I didn't think of that. Never mind. He isn't that deep. The deeper they walked, the denser the forest became. Now, they couldn't even see a single ray of light coming in. Soon, the place became completely dark and humid. It was such a dense jungle, they were able to see quite a few beasts on their way. They saw a tiger, twice as large as normal ones, sleeping. Isn't that dangerous? Well. Oh, this guy. You grew so much. The tiger roared and rushed to him like a lightning bolt. It then showed its stomach as it lay down on its back. Right. You need to survive here too. Everyone is equal in the face of muscle strength. Humans and beasts. Wouldn't both want to live? It was strange to see such a huge tiger come lay down in front of you, acting all cute like a cat. But the thing was, in front of the palace lord, it did look like a cat. On the way, the palace lord would constantly pet all the beasts he saw. The divine pond is there. Ah, we finally arrived. Contrary to before, the huge man now had a serious expression on his face. In Yunnan, we refer to the purple woodgrass that you are looking for as the divine spirit grass. But it isn't something we farm. Although it was known to be widespread, now hardly a few plants have survived. Why? When the demonic sect attacked us 100 years back, we set fire to it. They wanted to see those bastards burn along with it. Did that work? No, it had no effect. It is said that the warriors were faster in escaping from there. Then why burn it? No, you should think before doing something like that. Doing something like that is no different from acting first and thinking later. Anyway, since then, there is only one place you can find it, the divine pond. The Beast Palace Lord, along with the disciples of Mount Hua, traversed through the thick forest. Oh, wow! Watching the scene unfold before them, the disciples of Mount Hua became shocked. It was beautiful. No, it was right to call it sacred rather than beautiful. There was a huge pond in the middle of this lush jungle. No, for this size, it should be called a lake rather than a pond. Around this lake, which looked so clear, were colorful flowers they had never seen before. It was a beautiful sight, but it still put fear into their heart. How deep is it? Obviously, the water was transparent, but the bottom was invisible. The deeper the blue light went down, the more it felt like it was getting sucked in. Divine Pond. A pond where gods dwell. Then, it was really the right name to call it. If there was a god, he would have to be in a place like this. This is the divine pond. We cannot go further. Then Wait. The Beast Palace Lord frowned. We shouldn't go in? No, you are free to move. I have already told you. Then why? There is one minor problem. Yes? It would be better to see it with your own eyes. After hesitating for a moment, the man reached out. Swish! A rabbit that was passing by floated into the air and was caught by the palace lord's hand. A little startled, the rabbit started wrinkling its nose. Huh? Why the rabbit? Take a good look now. He threw the rabbit into the lake. Splash! The rabbit landed softly on the edge of the lake and it brushed around. It was a sight that could calm a weary heart. At that moment, Kwang! Baekchun's eyes went wide. Something black had risen from the lake. What? The only thing they saw was that it was a huge creature with long fangs and a huge mouth. The gigantic mouth literally consumed the entire area the rabbit was on. The only thing they saw was that something had gulped the rabbit. All that was left was the huge bite marks on the edge of the pond. The disciples of Mount Hua couldn't say anything and blankly looked around. It was only then that the ripples on the pond subsided. After a long while, Yu Yisor said, What was that? And the rest of them began. It was huge. Why was it so huge? I thought it would eat a human in one bite. The Beast Palace Lord nodded and frowned. The ink-scaled blood python. It is a giant snake that lives in the divine pond. What? A snake? It wasn't a dragon. It wasn't a dragon. It has to be a dragon. It isn't that we weren't allowed to enter, but we couldn't because of that monster inside. Was that why this was a secret place? Even Chung Myung, who had seen many things in his 2 lives, laughed at this absurd sight. Chapter 226. Who keeps a dragon in their pond? What kind of pond would have a dragon living in it? What the hell is this place? The Beast Palace Lord shook his head as he heard Chung Myung's words. A dragon is an imaginary animal. What you just saw was the ink-scaled blood python. What is different between the two? What I just saw looked like an imaginary animal too. But it exists, right? Chung Myung scratched his head. I'm an idiot for thinking something good would happen here. He had initially questioned why the people lived in the barren wasteland despite having such fertile land. But how can a person even live here? A tiger was 2 times the normal size, and a bloody dragon living in the pond. It was a damn circus show. But the Beast Palace Lord shrugged his shoulders. That guy there is also a spirit creature. His scales are so strong that even a sword doesn't work on its body, and it has strong enough power to change the entire terrain of this place with a single move of its tail. It is a literal monster. Even the Lord cannot handle it then. Well, I don't know. I need to fight it to know about that, but I cannot go in there. And since that thing doesn't come out, there is no need to go and bring trouble onto ourselves either. So. It sounded like a sore loser giving excuses when they couldn't win. Chung Myung had felt it strange to make himself sound weak when he had that body. But this creature was called the ink-scaled blood python of the snake world. First of all, he worried if that thing could even come under the category of a snake. The Beast Palace worships this? Worship? The Beast Palace Lord smiled bitterly. What kind of bastard would worship a snake? What is the point of a man worshipping a beast? Could a person who holds the throne of the Beast Palace even say such things? Baekchun, who was riding on Chung Myung's shoulder, wagged its tail in agreement. The place isn't called a divine pond because the snake stays there. In fact, the beast came into this place a while after we gave it the name. Then, don't you have to get rid of it? Why? Didn't I tell you? This place is sacred. It is natural for animals to live in such places. However, the beasts here are just a bit unusual. A bit? I guess you don't know what a bit means. The members of the Beast Palace people cannot go into the divine pond, and the snake doesn't come out of it. He is like a neighbor who doesn't like to mingle. So why fight it? Right. The Beast Palace Lord laughed. Anyway, that guy will attack anything that touches the pond. That is the problem. In order to get the purple woodgrass, we need to go into the divine pond. And the imuki, no, that snake, it has to be dealt with. Right. The Beast Palace Lord nodded his head as if he was pleased with the disciples' understanding. It is such a minor problem. Chung Myung smiled. Yes, quite trivial. How can life and death be such a huge thing? Life is such a minute and passing feeling. Oh, Amitabha. You're a Taoist, you idiot. Then should we pray to Buddha? Chung Myung shouted, pointing to the pond. There is something in there that can kill us, and you think correcting me when I mutter some wrong prayer is important? If we go in, one hit, just one hit, no, one bite in front of that mouth. Dark pits were being created among the harmoniously grown grass as they constantly stepped on them. It was surprising that along with it having a huge range when it came to biting things, it could rip up the ground with it too. I don't even think the Tang family head can deal with it. Even the elders of Wudang weren't powerful enough to face it. It couldn't be compared to any master who was out in the world. One bite was enough to suck the light out of one's life. Baekchun looked at the quiet lake and said, It resembles a flood dragon that is on the verge of turning into a pure dragon. In that case, shouldn't it be time for it to refrain from killing and start cultivating? A dragon? What stupid dragon stories are you talking about? What kind of fake tales are you telling? If such a snake exists, then dragons need to exist too. Huh? That makes sense? Chung Myung, who was speechless as he heard that, sighed. Although the scenery looked a little bit scary now, it was very beautiful a while ago. And here I was thinking that things were working out so smoothly. There is no way that would ever happen. Chung Myung scratched his head. He thought things were going too well in the Beast Palace. He had been treated so well in Yunnan and things had progressed comfortably. But now they had run into this situation. How do we take it down? How do we take it down? Chung Myung looked back at Yunjong. That is a beast. But if you just go into that place with the enthusiasm that everything will work out, you're bound to die someday. Chung Myung. Baekchun had the softest smile. I have always respected your opinion, but I think now is a good time to reconsider. If you want death, then Sajio should go first. It's fine. It isn't like that thing has no head. Most things in the world can be solved with breaking heads. Sometimes I'm surprised that you're a Taoist. As if not caring for Baekchun's words, Chung Myung looked at the lake again. His face looked like he was thinking of running into the lake. The palace lord looked at him with a worried face. I didn't mean to say this when I brought you here, but will you be okay? He's fine. He's stronger than he looks. Yeah, his character is reassuring as well. I will definitely hold a memorial service for you then. No, are these brats really saying this? I'm the former Plum Blossom Sword Saint. Chung Myung grunted. If a mere creature dares to attack a person without recognizing them, it's bound to end up as snake soup. Besides, it seems like food supplies are tight in Gongmyong. So if we catch that thing, it'll feed us for 3 or 4 days. Such a nice solution. Even Zhuge Liang wouldn't have been able to think of something like this. Fine, then... Oh, wait. Chung Myung, who was about to rush ahead, stopped as he heard Baekchun's cry. Why? Lord, could you possibly let us know where the grass is? That isn't too difficult. The grass with the white flowers over there. Those are it. When the Lord pointed to one side, Baekchun nodded. Look carefully, Chung Myung. Taking down the dragon, no, the snake isn't important. If that grass gets damaged in the middle of the fight, it'll be all for naught. Okay. Chung Myung nodded at the advice. Shring! He pulled out his sword with a clear sound from its sheath. After swinging it a couple of times to get used to it, he blinked. No matter how it tries, it's still only a lowly creature. Let's go. Without delay, he rushed towards the divine pond. Wow, will he be fine? The disciples of Mount Hua seemed worried. Although putting everything aside, the idiot in front of them, who rushed into the pond to face the dragon-like snake, was someone who was slated to be the best in the world. This time, they were genuinely worried about him. Splash! Chung Myung descended close to the pond. Contrary to the speed at which he had run towards the pond, his movements changed as soon as he got near it. The way he jumped across seemed delicate and light. It felt like a thief was trying to sneak into a house. Chung Myung turned his head and looked up. Great, it didn't come this time. And he began to move his feet slowly. Come on, think clearly. My job isn't to beat the snake, but to take the grass. He had to secure the grass first, and then kill the snake. Maybe after that, he could make snake soup. Chung Myung began to cautiously move to the place where the grass was. Let's pull this out. It was then. Shh. He started to hear a strange sound. It was a low, creepy sound that made his heart pound. Chung Myung slowly turned around. He saw something huge and elongated rising up from the surface of the pond. Its transparent, shiny black scales seemed to reflect all 7 colors brilliantly, and its tongue slithered inside and outside of its tightly shut pitch-black mouth. Even more impressive were its eyes. Its small eyes, set like red dots between that black body, were staring right at him. It looked pissed. Are you having a rough time living with others? Chung Myung scratched his head with an embarrassed face as if he had been caught stealing. If this goes on, then I'm screwed. Chung Myung smiled. Let's just smile to avoid getting spit on the face. Can I take the flower first, and then we'll talk later? Hee! Guang! The snake rushed to the place where Chung Myung was. I must be going crazy, thinking of talking with snakes. Chung Myung narrowly managed to avoid being eaten. He clenched his teeth as he rushed towards the black body. It's full of openings. No matter how great the spirit creature was, its biggest weakness was that it had a huge size. There were too many places he could hit, even with his eyes closed. Chung Myung clenched his sword and went for the long neck of the snake. Kang! Kang? Not kang, but kang? What a clear sound. Chung Myung raised his sword. His sword was broken in 2. Even though he had put so much strength behind his swing, his sword had cleanly broken into 2 pieces after being hit by the snake's scales. Pling! He looked up and saw the top half of his sword rotating like a top as it soared in the sky. Immediately, it fell beside Chung Myung and pierced the ground. Oh my! You have gone so deep! The ground has been cut so well! Chung Myung smiled as he looked at the broken sword. It is a sword that has been passed on in the Tang family, a treasured sword. I am giving it to you as a token of our friendship, so use it well. Treasured sword, my ass! How dare you sell me defective products? You can't be serious. To give me a sword that cannot even cut a snake. Chung Myung raised his head with a nervous expression. The snake seemed to tilt its head to the left and right, very much like how Chung Myung would do when he was angry and ready to fight. I do that a lot too. You aren't a good person either, are you? He smiled as he looked at the broken sword, the snake, and then his sword. I don't think you understand human language, but can I maybe go change my sword and then we can continue to fight? Or not fighting sounds good too. Ah, shit! The snake turned around and rushed towards Chung Myung. Like a viper, ready to take down its prey, it opened its fangs and came to Chung Myung to gulp him down in one bite. The gigantic pitch-black mouth looked like a door to hell. Ah! Chung Myung quickly jumped over the head of the snake and then breathed ki into the broken sword and began to hit the snake on the head. Die! 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 Break! Kung! 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 He was clearly using his ki, but he could still only hear clanking sounds. Its scales were so hard that despite hitting them so many times, not even a single scratch had formed on it. No, this makes no sense. Even Chung Myung was shocked. Swords were made to cut through things. This was why there were so many techniques to enhance it and take the opponent down. This isn't even like I am dealing with man-made armor. How is this? Huh? The snake jerkily raised its head slightly. At the same time, Chung Myung, who was on his head, rose into the air. Thud. Huh? Chung Myung watched the figure of the snake as it caught his ankle. Ugh. Why does its eyes look like it's smiling? No! And the snake began to violently move his body to the sides. Bang, 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 bang. To the left and then to the right. Ugh! Chung Myung hit the ground multiple times, and each time he would groan out in pain. You fucking snake! At that moment, the snake threw him into the air and opened its mouth. Ugh! Swish! The moment Chung Myung saw that, he glanced at the snake's tail that had emerged from the water at lightning speed, cutting through the air, flying towards him. That's too much! Swish! Chung Myung's body that had been hit with the tail moved like a cannonball. Pah! He flew into the water and jumped on the water surface like a throwing rock. He bounced up a couple of times and eventually crashed to the ground. Boom! The disciples of Mount Hua didn't dare to see this and shut their eyes. Is he dead? Ah, no way. As if he would die. Don't say that. He's dead. Let's check to make sure. The disciples and the palace lord rushed to where Chung Myung had crashed, and when they saw his condition, they all shut their eyes. He's dead. I don't think we need to even build a grave. Happy afterlife. You lived a good life. To say that he was in another condition when only his 2 legs were visible above the ground was stupid. The rest of his body had formed a crater in the ground. Oh, right. He has to be dead. Pah! However, Chung Myung suddenly jumped up from the hole he had been in. You guys have no conscience. Even the underworld doesn't accept him. I can understand. Chung Myung had blood dripping down his nose as he looked up. No! Does that snake have a death wish? It was impossible for him to accept being defeated by an animal. And as such, with his reasoning thrown out the window, Chung Myung screamed, You snake brat! I am going to make soup with you! What can you do? Even a sword doesn't work on it. Even ki doesn't work. How can you do anything to it? It didn't even scratch the scales, right? Chung Myung shouted, If I couldn't do it before, then I'll make it happen now. There's nothing in the world which is impossible. Right. But wipe off that nosebleed first, Chung Myung. Chapter 227. Who keeps a dragon in their pond? My pride is hurt by a dirty snake. The dirt. Spit. Chung Myung rushed to spit out the dirt in his mouth. Every time he spat out dirt, blood gushed from his nose. Wipe your nose. Is a nosebleed so important? What? Why is it flowing like this? Oh my, that snake bastard is killing humans. Yu Yi-sol, who watched it, shook her head and pulled out a handkerchief from her sleeve. With it, she approached Chung Myung. She is thinking of gently cleaning. Shh! Yu Yi-sol shoved the handkerchief into Chung Myung's nose. Chung Myung tried to move, but she grabbed onto his neck and pushed the cloth into his nose. Was this caring or harassing? Just looking at Chung Myung's face would make it clear that he didn't like it. Chung Myung, who now had a handkerchief up the nose, grunted. There's no peaceful place anywhere. The Beast Palace Lord, who was quietly looking at the disciples, opened his mouth. The ink-scaled blood python is the most dangerous of the spirit creatures in Yunnan. At least it has a gentle personality, but it causes harm when someone enters its territory, so it is vicious and disastrous. Gentle? Right. It is docile. Ugh. However, it shows an obsession with its territory. It doesn't tolerate someone else touching even a single stone or grass, so it is almost impossible to deceive its senses and pull out the herbs you need. You should have told me that a bit earlier. In the end, it means that we have to defeat it to get the grass. Right. The Beast Palace Lord nodded. It is regrettable that I have to say this to the descendants of the Plum Blossom Sword Saint who came from the Central Plains. But the Beast Palace has no solution to this problem. You need to solve it yourselves. After that, Baekchun approached Chung Myung with a serious expression. Chung Myung, I think giving up would be better. Giving up? You want to give up? There is no other way here. Our swords cannot hurt it, so how can we deal with it? You got lucky before. If you had been unlucky, you would have turned into its food. Chung Myung made a sick sound, indicating he didn't like what he had heard. Actually, he should have died. If it had been someone other than Chung Myung, they would have cleanly left this world and walked into the netherworld. How do such things even exist? Aside from its gigantic size, what was more terrifying was the absurd hardness of its scales. Even though Chung Myung had raised his ki to the maximum, he couldn't scratch a single scale. The current Chung Myung was powerful enough to cut down literal mountains. That would mean that the scales of the snake were stronger than mountains. Chung Myung scratched his head. In the first place, swordsmanship as a skill had been created to deal with people. It had been polished and trained for centuries with the thought of cutting down a human body. In other words, if it can't be cut by a sword, regardless of the swordsmanship he could perform, it would all be meaningless. In the end, is it strength that I lack? Right. You aren't any less powerful, but this isn't the time. Maybe after heading back, we can think of another way. Okay, let's head back now. Oh. Baekchun looked at Chung Myung with startled eyes. No. Why is he being so obedient? Let's head back to the Beast Palace. I should have heard the full thing. If what I lack is strength, I'll increase it. I will break the damn snake's head with swordsmanship. Chung Myung gritted his teeth. If he was still the Plum Blossom Sword Saint, he would have beaten the snake with mere chopsticks if he wanted. But he wasn't the Sword Saint anymore, and he hated having to deal with this in such a troublesome manner. Sayong, my Sayong, I live in such a place. Chung Myung, who looked at the lake, mumbled, I'll come back and see you in a while. And then he turned around and ran to the Beast Palace. Let's go. No, what more will you do? The disciples of Mount Hua began to run after Chung Myung. The palace lord laughed at the children. Such fun people. No one come in. Ya, you idiot. Kwang. Chung Myung slammed the door shut and went inside. Baekchun looked at him and sighed. What is he up to? Yoonjung glanced at Baekchun and said, Still, it is Chung Myung, right? He's a guy who has always managed to find an answer when there was a problem. But when has he ever just simply found the answer? Huh? I am worried he will do weird things. It is quite natural for me to think that at this point. I am worried about the place where he is going to do weird things now. I am worried about the Nanman Beast Palace. This was true. Yoonjung glanced around. When he felt the gazes of the soldiers around him, he smiled awkwardly and said, He couldn't have not thought about it, right? I hope so. Baekchun sighed deeply, knowing that his premonitions would be wrong. Chung Myung, who went in, took out 2 wooden boxes. One was large and the other small. He took out another small box. Then he crossed his arms and legs and sat there. He took a deep breath. I'm going to have to do this once anyway. He knew that this day would come. He was now strong enough to resemble a shadow of his past self, but he hadn't nearly reached the level of a sword saint yet. Of course, the current Chung Myung was still cultivating at a slow pace, but as the days went by, his responsibilities increased, and the more he did something, the more enemies he would make. There was no time for him to take it easy like he had in the past. Even if he started practicing wholeheartedly now, it would take him 30 years to catch up with his past self. But is there any guarantee that nothing will happen in those 30 years? The Jongnam sect or the Wudang sect could come and attack Mount Hua. Maybe even the demonic sect might get revived again. And if he was unlucky, he might get eaten by a spirit creature. No matter what the circumstances, he had to overcome it. To do that, he needed to get stronger. Only then could Mount Hua become stronger. In the end, it depends on my strength. He had almost finished modifying his body with the martial arts he had been practicing. Now, with his past experiences, he would naturally be able to unfold the martial arts that he had used in the past. But before he could do that, he needed one last thing. Then, Chung Myung sighed and looked at the wooden boxes in front of him. Click. The first box he opened was the large one. Inside it was the soul vitality pill he had forcefully stolen from Hyunjung. Chung Myung looked at it with bright shining eyes. Then he opened the second one. It was smaller than the first one, but it looked more luxurious. Click. As soon as the second wooden box was opened, a stinky smell began to waft through the room. The pill was a black round object with an ominous feel to it. This was part of the legacy of the Tang family, the Heavenly Poison Pill. The Heavenly Poison Pill was said to be one of the best products of alchemy in the world. Originally, it wasn't something that outsiders could receive, but Tanganak had given it to Chung Myung. Unlike the ominous black light that seemed to evidence its harmful effects, the pill actually improved one's internal ki. Those who took it wouldn't get poisoned anymore, and the damage would be reduced by a lot as well. If it is something that develops resistance to poison, then... Phew! Chung Myung took a deep breath and he looked at the smallest box. Unlike the other two pills, the third one was different. There was no way that Chung Myung, who had reached such a strong level in the past, couldn't handle the other pills. The problem was the third one. Even Tanganak had hesitated in giving it to him. Chung Myung opened the box carefully. Unlike the previous boxes that had pills immediately inside the container, this one had a small white jade bottle. He took a deep breath and opened the lid of this bottle. Swish! As soon as he opened it, the scent which came from it tickled his nose. It was slightly sweet and refreshing, and it felt purer than most medicines in terms of fragrance alone. But a person shouldn't be fooled by scent when handling this elixir. What was in this was nothing else but poison. That too, an extreme poison that was called the Tears of Beauty. Phew! Chung Myung looked at the bottle and then smelled it. As soon as he smelled it, he immediately asked himself if he had to go this far. Can I trust him? Old memories came to his mind. Dao Xiong, what? Do you know what the best elixir in the Central Plains is? Chung Myung frowned at the question. However, Tangbo was someone who normally used to ask him similar things regularly. The Soul Vitality Pill? The Heavenly Sun Pill? Wrong. Those can't even be considered elixirs. What are you talking about? Seeing the expression on Chung Myung's face, Tangbo giggled and smiled. The best elixir in the world is actually in our family. I know about the Heavenly Poison Pill, but it is inferior compared to the pills of other sects. It sure is a pill that uses poison as a medicine, but that is all. Ugh! Tangbo seemed to have nothing to say. Anyway, it isn't that. The best pill is called the Tears of Beauty. Tears of Beauty? I haven't heard of it. That is expected, because it is a poison that is difficult even for a family to deal with. Such a strong poison in elixir. It seems you've got hit too much these days that your words seem to be getting messed up. When did I get hit? All the hits I got were from you. Chung Myung got up, making Tangbo step back. Not that I'm complaining or anything. Chung Myung smiled and sat down. Go on. This Tears of Beauty is nothing other than a combination of many poisons in the world. It still seems like the worst poison to me. No, it isn't that bad. Huh? Tangbo smiled. Actually, the poison was made because we thought it would give us an amazing poison which couldn't be cured, but it didn't show the effects that we were expecting. The different poisons ended up neutralizing each other and didn't have any extreme effects. The Plum Blossom Sword Saint Chung Myung looked at Tangbo. And the conclusion, Dao's Hyung, what is energy? Ki. Right, it is ki. But animals and plants only have ki in an appropriate size. But aren't warriors able to endlessly replenish ki in their bodies? Right. But among animals, there are creatures that can hold ki. They are called spirit creatures. Such animals have their own inner place in their body, and they go beyond the limits of other animals. Don't say obvious things and tell me what the result was. I'm almost there. But spirit creatures aren't the only things apart from warriors that can hold ki. Poison can hold ki too. Huh? Tangbo smiled. When a non-poisonous beast possesses ki, it turns to a spirit creature. But when a poisonous animal has ki, it turns to poison ki. Poison ki. Yes, otherwise the poison cannot stop and will continue to turn into more poison. In other words, the poison of a poisonous creature is nothing more than the ki it has accumulated throughout its life. Chung Myung tilted his head. Sounds like dog shit. So in our family, we tried to absorb the poison of such poisonous creatures. We tried to direct a bunch of poisons to one single place and use it as ki for ourselves. And what happened? Everyone died. Wait, what was that, you idiot? When Chung Myung clenched his fist, Tangbo waved his hands and stepped back. No! Listen till the end! Till the end! Listen to this bullshit? Because this is no bullshit. It failed, but it worked. How can you know that? People died. Tangbo chuckled. The members of the Tang family rushed to subdue a survivor who had gone crazy with the mixed poison, but they were all beat up and thrown away. Because of that man's sudden strength and tenacity, the sect almost collapsed. This happened 200 years ago, by the way. Of course, we later found out that because he hadn't resisted the poison and accepted it into his body, it had provided very clean ki to the person. It had another effect too. It could be used to get a huge amount of ki that cannot be compared to any other elixir. The Tears of Beauty might not be the ultimate poison in the world, but it can be the best elixir in the world. It can purify anything. Chung Myung took a deep breath. So, how exactly does the poison purify the body? I don't know. If I knew, would I be like this? I would have already drunk in a bowl of it and even broken your back. No, that was a mistake. Break. Back. Chung Myung smiled as he got up from his seat. Tangbo slowly backed away. Oh, let's get it over with today. Chung Myung flew towards Tangbo without delay. That was Hyung! Hyung! I didn't mean it! You bastard! Is it alright for Daos to beat people up like this? Spare me! Hyung! Die, you idiot! Chung Myung, who recalled the memories of the past, sighed as he looked at the bottle in his hand. It seems like I am bound by my past. Now, should I eat this or not? Chapter 228. Who keeps a dragon in their pond? Chung Myung licked his lips and looked at the bottle. Sadly, although Tangbo was someone who spoke nonsense when it came to eating food, he never lied. So the chances of his words being true were pretty high. There is absolutely nothing wrong with the theory. Tangbo had mentioned that there had already been a case of internal qi massively rising successfully after the consumption of the poison. Of course, he had also said that the person couldn't handle the poison qi within his body and had died eventually. The key is whether I can purify it after taking in the poison qi. Basically, the way one normally dealt with poison qi or poison within the body was to discharge it out of the body. They would move it to a specific corner of the body through which they would be able to release it outside later. Even if it gets purified, the poison has to be discharged. People generally tended to not absorb something like poison into their bodies after all. So how could he do something crazy like taking in poison qi? But Tangbo had told him to take the drink. He had told him how to handle the poison qi within the body and purify the qi after it was done. He had specified that rather than releasing it outside, he had to purify it within him. It'll work. It has to work. Chung Myung shook his head. I'm not joking. I think it is worth trying, especially for you, Hyung. Isn't the biggest characteristics of Taoist purifying things? It is impossible for us Tang people to do so since we are already used to having poison within our bodies. But if someone like you do it, you can handle the qi and purify it without releasing it outside, right? You can even break the head of the Heavenly Demon. And what if I die? That would be unfortunate, but it would be a valuable sacrifice. Of course, Tangbo got hit after that. The key of a Taoist. Chung Myung didn't feel good. All the conditions required for him to do this had been met. He had the drink in front of him. He knew that by ingesting it, the qi in his body would be increased. Along with that, he would even gain resistance to poison. And Chung Myung's qi. He had already confirmed after practicing in the Tang family that in his life, his qi was a lot better than the poisons used by the Tang family. This was something that Chung Myung wouldn't attempt in the past. In other words, no one would even dare to do this. And if there was anyone that could do it, with pure qi better than what it was in the past, and the ability to operate that qi better than the Plum Blossom Sword Saint of the past, there was only Chung Myung. If other people tried to do it, they would die the moment they put the poison into their mouths. Chung Myung finally grabbed the 2 pills. Do I need to take it? If not, just throw it away. Although the only reason he was going to do it now was because of the snake bastard, he had been thinking about this for a long time. So he even got this drink from the Tang family. But previously, he wasn't able to make his mind up and take them. But now, he had the perfect chance. I'd rather die than go through with this shit. Chung Myung boldly stretched out his hand and picked up the Soul Vitality pill and the Heavenly Poison pill. Without any delay, he put both pills into his mouth. As soon as the pills entered his mouth, they melted in an instant and went down his throat. His stomach felt hot, but then, for a moment, the sense of heat stopped. Was that it? Even Chung Myung was worried at his body's lack of reaction. He had eaten 2 pills. Maybe he needed a couple more of the Soul Vitality pills. Maybe another few, and then there would be... Chung Myung frowned. Since when did I turn into a coward? It is said that when a person grows old, they become cowards. But I'm young though. What can I be afraid of when I'm young? In any case, the number of Soul Vitality pills we have is limited. When he first had it, he felt refreshed, but that was all. The Soul Vitality pill didn't have the effect of multiplying the qi within the body. If that was possible, wouldn't all the Shaolin sect disciples be the greatest disciples of the world? Moreover, in exchange for creating the clear and pure qi, didn't Chung Myung have to try again and again to generate a very small amount after that? In the end, the Soul Vitality pill was a solution for Mount Hua rather than for Chung Myung. He had to do something if he didn't want to spend years of his time just waiting for his pure qi to normally generate. Having made his decision, he sat cross-legged. First, he had to build a solid foundation. Quack! There was the sound of water running through his body. The pills, which had now melted in his stomach, were creating a river of ki which flowed through his body. I shouldn't absorb this. It isn't the ki which was important now. This ki had to be conserved so that it can act as a medium to help him absorb the ki of the tears of beauty and protect his body from its poison. I have to gather it in my danjan. Chung Myung used the ki of the 2 pills to surround his danjan and open his eyes. Opening your eyes in the middle of cultivating ki would be impossible for others. This was possible for Chung Myung only because he was already past the normal level. Okay. Chung Myung groaned and grabbed the bottle in front of him. If I die, Tangbo, you are dead. You are already dead, but I'll come to kill you again. I'll make sure that even the dead can die again. Then, he gulped the drink down and closed his eyes. It seems fine. The tears of beauty, which had flowed into his stomach, didn't move or cause any reactions. There was only a faint feeling of something flowing. Here it comes. Chung Myung was terrified and raised his ki. The poison ki from the liquid was spreading through his body very quickly. Even Chung Myung was scared at its pace. When he was fighting Tangbo or other strong people in his previous life that used poison, the only poison which had ever made its way to him was either from long-range attacks or from the weapons. And how strong were they? At best, they would have been 100th or even 1,000th of the amount the bottle had. That alone would have been enough to kill him. But since he had drunk the entire poison directly without even diluting it, it was natural that he was having a hard time. Was it too much? Maybe I should have taken half. Why is it that regardless of whether it is alcohol or poison, I always gulp it down in one shot? Sahyung, please fix my habit. The poison ki was quickly spreading through his body. Chung Myung was so terrified that he raised his ki to protect his danjan. I have to be careful. I have to purify it and absorb it. It isn't about purifying and releasing. He clenched his teeth and began to circulate his ki. His next step would be to make sure he didn't release the poison outside. What kind of poison is this? It was overflowing. It was like pouring poisoned water into a jar filled with normal water. The poison inside just kept multiplying. It felt like he was going to explode. Chung Myung opened his eyes. Startled, he closed them again tightly. What did I see? Not believing what he had seen, Chung Myung opened his eyes to confirm it. He didn't see it wrong. His body, which was now dyed black, was starting to swell. A black pig! The clothes he was wearing couldn't handle his swelling body and was tearing up here and there. He quickly closed his eyes again and focused. If this continued to happen, his body would explode and he would die before he could recover his internal strength. Hurry up! The ki flowing through him was starting to get hot. The pure ki inside Chung Myung's danjan began to devour and purify the poison ki that surrounded it. The momentum of the events happening inside Chung Myung's body was so great that it was like a dam had exploded. However, the poison ki didn't seem to decrease. Maybe the poison ki had realized that the other parts of Chung Myung's body were untouched, or it had realized that the poison ki near the danjan was vanishing, so it rushed to the danjan all at once. I need to stop it! The ki of the heavenly poison pill and the soul vitality pill, which was around his danjan, blocked the poison ki. Kang! Bang! Kwang! It felt like his body was imploding from the inside. He made sure to do his best to stay focused and began to purify the poison ki into pure ki and channeled it back into his danjan. Woom! Unable to withstand the recoil of his body swelling up so suddenly, the blood vessels in Chung Myung's body began to burst eventually. His nose and mouth began to gush out blood, and the blood that dripped down onto the floor made sizzling noises. Even though he was purifying the ki, there was no end to the poison ki. Let's see if you win or I win. Chung Myung endured the pain and began to try harder. The anxious eyes of the disciples of Mount Hua who were in front of the room had changed expressions. Don't you feel something? I suddenly feel weird. Something seems wrong. Feeling troubled, Jogul opened his mouth. Should we take a look? Huh? He told us not to come in, but didn't tell us not to look, right? Baekchun smiled brightly and nodded his head. A great loophole. You have grown so much. It is all thanks to Sasuk. Right. It is up to you to handle it, and there is no need for me to stop you. Go ahead and do it. But the two stayed silent for a while without moving, and Jogul said, Sasuk, your personality has changed a lot too. Although he hated hearing that, Baekchun calmly accepted the words of his sajil. The pot is calling the kettle black. While anyone is bound to be tainted when they are next to Chung Myung, your personality will change too. I am glad to know that, but don't waste time and check it. Yes, Jogul mumbled as he walked to the room of Chung Myung. He won't hear me, right? Chung Myung would have definitely noticed that they were approaching the room. However, since there had been no shouts coming from the room, he must have been busy doing something else. What the hell is he doing for him to be so lost? Jogul moved forward and made a hole in the window with his finger. It wouldn't have shown good manners for them to make a hole in the door of the Beast Palace, but doing so to a window seemed a lot better to Jogul. He took a deep breath and began to use his finger. Jogul, who had been looking into the room, quickly turned back and smiled. Sasuk, what is it? What is that brat doing? I have no idea what he is doing. Huh? But it seems like we need to escape. Huh? Faster! Huh? Jogul began to run as soon as he said that, and the rest of them began to run after him. Baekchun had already passed Jogul and asked as he looked back, But what are we running from? That room? Or the Beast Palace? I don't know. Just run. No. Tell me what we are even running. It was then. Baekchun turned around. No! The entire palace that contained Chung Myung's room began to shake. Baekchun's face had turned pale as he looked at the side of the palace, trembling. That madman! This is the beast! Kwang! Before he could finish, an explosion occurred. The entire side of the palace shattered. What? That... Forgetting to run away, they all stopped and looked back at the scene. They all saw a black sphere. There was a gigantic black vortex in front of them. It seemed appropriate to call it an evil dragon rising into the sky endlessly. Kwang! 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 The wind the vortex created had a momentum that seemed to absorb everything in the world. What in the world did he do in the room for this to happen? Seriously? The color of this black vortex then began to change gradually. As if it was releasing its force on the world, the black vortex first turned gray, and then became a pure white light, and finally turned transparent. However, the strong winds around it didn't die in the slightest. No, it was turning faster and more ferocious. Huh? It felt like it would suck in everything, and at one point, even Jogul's body began to float up in the air. Jogul! The disciples hurriedly grabbed Jogul's ankles and pulled him to the ground. But the body of Jogul, which was being pulled by the wind, fluttered like a paper doll. Damn it! Chung Myung, you bastard! Please stop doing such things! That was the only thing he could think of, even though he didn't know if Chung Myung could hear his words. The beast around the palace that had jumped out in shock couldn't handle the force from the vortex and got sucked into it. Baekchun ended up looking up and yelled, Someone, stop that bastard! Who can stop that bastard, Sasuk? Finally, the figure of Chung Myung could be seen. He had risen into the air with his legs crossed, and as if he was cultivating ki, he looked very serene and calm. He looked so fucking calm that the disciples wanted to punch him in the face. Clench. Crash. To make matters worse, the roofs of the nearby buildings were being torn off. At this point, the entire palace would turn into a mess if this was allowed to continue. Quang! A terrifying key exploded in all directions with the sound of a huge explosion. Yeah, you bastard! The disciples of Mount Hua got caught in the storm of ki and were all thrown into the air. Dud, bang, bang, bang. The disciples of Mount Hua, who got whipped by the wind, groaned. All of a sudden, the vortex that had been busy trying to absorb things into it was now releasing ki into the world, as if it was trying to blow the entire world away. Well, nothing was happening except for buildings being shattered and beasts running away in fear. This is bad. The disciples of Mount Hua were in shock as they saw the ruined surroundings. It was then, step, step, step. A man slowly walked through the floating dust. Chung Myung, who seemed to be the happiest person in the world right now, smiled as he saw the disciples of Mount Hua. Now, let's go take down that snake bastard. It looks like we're the ones who are going to be taken down, you bastard. Please do things in fucking moderation. Chapter 229. Who keeps a dragon in their pond? Yeah, brat, Baekchun shouted with an angry face. What? But Chung Myung didn't seem to care. Baekchun, who was enraged at this, started stuttering. No, brat. For now, get yourself covered up. What? Get dressed. Your clothes. Huh? Chung Myung lowered his head and looked at his body. I still have innerwear. What's the problem? Baekchun scratched his head. Even though he still had his innerwear, Chung Myung was showing off the rest of his entire body. He just had one piece of cloth covering his most important part. Of course, his muscles were good enough to make someone jealous, but he had to at least wear pants. Regardless of how he felt, it was embarrassing for the rest of the people who saw him. Your Sago is with us. Baekchun was worried that Yu Yiseol's eyes would become tainted with this sight, but she seemed calm. She looked around calmly without a word and picked up a piece of cloth she found. Then she went to Chung Myung. Put this on. Thank you. Thank you for the tears in her eyes from the sight you have shown us. Chung Myung, however, just calmly took the clothes from Yu Yiseol, shrugging his shoulders. Now I can beat that snake bastard. Let's go get the grass. As soon as Yoonjung heard that, he sighed. Chung Myung, the snake isn't the problem right now. Huh? Why? It was then. What is this? What crazy bastard did this? Huh? With loud shouts, the soldiers of the Beast Palace rushed to the ruined place. Their faces were red with anger. They are the descendants of the Plum Blossom Sword Saint, so we treated them like guests with all our hearts. Seems like they want to die. All the soldiers were enraged at the sight and kept yelling. Once they started shouting, more and more people joined in. Huh? Chung Myung smiled awkwardly as he looked around at the shattered buildings. The entire place looked as if a war had occurred there. It wasn't intentional. Would those words really solve such a situation? Baekchun sighed and tried to speak. This was something that Chung Myung did, but he was the one who was in charge of this party. He had to step up and apologize first. I apologize. But then, Chung Myung grabbed him by the shoulder and pulled him back. Sasuk, I'll handle this. Huh? It was obviously just a slight pull, but Baekchun's body flew back as if he had been ejected from a cannon. Thud. Bounce, bounce. Baekchun bounced like a throwing stone on water and trembled. Chung Myung looked at his hand with a trembling face, and he scratched the back of his head as he smiled awkwardly. Sorry, I'm not used to it yet. Baekchun, who got up from the floor, looked at Chung Myung with red eyes. Come here. I'm going to kill you. Let's see if it's you or me who'll die today. Eh? Only Sasuk will die. Just stay put. I'll handle this. This fucking... Sasuk, calm down. Isn't he always like that? Calm down. Jogul and Yoonjung rushed to grab Baekchun, who was rearing for a fight. Chung Myung didn't care and stepped forward to face the soldiers. Their numbers had now grown enough to form a considerable crowd, and they all glared at Chung Myung with cold eyes. Are you the one who did this? Huh? What one? The one who destroyed the entire place. Eh? You must be joking now. How can we do this? What? Are you going to deny that you destroyed the building? Hearing that, Chung Myung laughed. Has anyone here seen this? It was a typical lie, but it didn't work. I saw it. One soldier came forward. I saw it. I saw it with my own eyes. A black circle rose to the sky like a tornado, and the wind that came from it was pulling in everything. So don't even think of making such excuses. Oh? Chung Myung looked at the man with surprised eyes. A tornado? Yes. The man's face was turning stiff, but he continued. Explain it. If you don't explain it properly, even if you are the descendants of the Plum Blossom Sword Saint, you will not be able to escape the punishment. That is, until the Plum Blossom Sword Saint comes here directly. Come here directly? I am the Plum Blossom Sword Saint. Chung Myung sighed and continued. So, if we fail to explain it, will you beat us up? If we have to. But isn't it strange? The soldier tilted his head. What is strange? You said that there was a tornado in the air near that part of the building. Right. Did I make it? Can a human do that? Right. Can a human do that? Chung Myung shook his head and continued. When a tornado rises and the building is shattered, isn't it common sense to normally worry about the people who are inside the building? But here you are, trying to put that blame on me. That... The soldier went silent. No, if they thought about it for a bit, it actually made sense. Could a human really create such a wind? No. And there is another strange thing. What? Let's say that I did create it. Chung Myung pretended to look around. Then are you saying that you are going to beat the person who created such a tornado with your bare hands? Are you even sane? The soldier kept silent. He isn't wrong. If this situation was really orchestrated by the young disciple of Mount Hua, then he had to be someone who transcended common sense. It wouldn't be easy to catch and imprison such a person. At least. What is this? A roaring voice filled the place suddenly. My lord! Greetings to the lord! The soldiers and guards who saw him fell flat on the ground. The disciples of Mount Hua also bowed as they saw the man. The soldiers and guards looked at the Lord. My lord, these people! Silence! The Beast Palace Lord raised his hand and stopped the guard from saying anything. And then, with shocked eyes, he moved towards Chung Myung. Thud, thud, thud. The ground vibrated with each step he took, and every time his foot touched the ground, it felt like the beasts around them would bounce up. Thud. Soon, the Beast Palace Lord approached Chung Myung and glared at him. Boy. Yes? The man's face was red. Unlike before, his voice was more of a groan as he looked at Chung Myung. Did you achieve it? Ah, to an extent. I guess I can say that my internal ki has increased a little. Extent? Yes, about this much. The Beast Palace Lord's face contorted. The man was shaking as if he couldn't stand what he had just heard. Then he patted Chung Myung on the shoulder. This extent? Right. Good. This much can happen. Pop, pop. Each time the hand slammed into Chung Myung's shoulder, a cracking sound could be heard. Am I going to die here? Is he actually angry at me? Each time his hand touched Chung Myung's body, pain surged through him. By the time the palace lord's laughter was over, Chung Myung had been half nailed to the floor. The man smiled as if he found that interesting as well and pulled Chung Myung up. Right, this kind of achievement calls for drinking. The faces of the soldiers went pale. Lord, they are sinners who destroyed the palace. They need to be punished. What? The palace lord yelled. You want to punish our guests for blowing up a little piece of the palace? Since when did the people of my beast palace become such cheap-minded people? Pathetic beings. The men quickly bowed their heads at his words. At that time, Chung Myung put his tongue out to tease the soldiers. This made the soldiers hate him even more. I really want to hit that bastard. Well, he came in as a guest. If only I can pull out some teeth from that mouth of his, I will die in peace. How can he have such a messed up personality despite being a descendant of the Plum Blossom Sword Saint? Of course, if they had met the past version of Chung Myung, they would realize that the two were exactly the same. However, the history and character of the Sword Saint were beautified, so they didn't know. If our guests achieve growth in the palace by blowing it up, we cannot not celebrate it. What? This little bastard. Lord, don't be too angry. Our Lord has such a big heart. Right. And we are in the wrong. Wrong? Where were you wrong? Such things might happen to a warrior when they practice. I blew up training halls when I was young too. Right? I see. The faces of the soldiers were a mess. How can the Lord get along so well with these strangers he met only a few days ago, and to prefer them over the soldiers and guards he had been with for a decade? He is playing the child card. He is not young to be even called a brat. Just looking at his face makes me want to kill him. The soldiers all sighed at the sight of the disciples of Mount Hua. Meanwhile, the disciples didn't look them in the eyes. The two groups sighed. Let's have a party. No, not now. Huh? The palace lord tilted his head. Not now. First, we need to take down that snake bastard, and then let's have it as a snack at night. Are you talking about the ink-skilled blood python? Yes. Yes, but be careful. It is a spirit creature after all. Right, a snake. Right. A man should have this much pride. Of course. Sighs came from all sides as they listened to the two people. What did you do? What? I am asking, what did you do? That? Chung Myung, who was heading into the divine pond, smiled at Baekchun's words. I increased my ki a little bit. I have grown a little. A little. Baekchun lifted his head up and looked at the sky, which was obscured by the trees. Oh my God. Please do something. What kind of little internal ki growth can pull that off? How could he take down a building? And beasts too? Should he be concerned because of Chung Myung's rapid growth? Or was he supposed to be surprised that he was able to gain such strength to fight the snake? Please, show me a way. Well, it didn't increase as much as I thought it would, but it is good that I didn't die from doing it. It is possible to die while increasing internal ki. It was a bit risky this time. I don't know anymore. I don't know a fucking thing anymore. Baekchun sighed and mumbled something. However, Chung Myung didn't pay any attention to it and continued to walk straight. This was dangerous. The poison in the ki had far exceeded his assumptions. One small mistake. If his ki control had been a little more docile, his body would have exploded and he would have died. But Chung Myung succeeded in purifying the tears of But Chung Myung succeeded in purifying the tears of beauty and had absorbed it. I was lucky to even absorb it. The initial amount of ki was vast. But what he could absorb into the body wasn't even a fraction of the original. Fortunately, since the vast amount of ki was already circling around his body, with just the little internal ki he had extracted, he was able to create much more pure internal ki. He was lacking compared to what he had in the prime time of his past life, but with this, he wouldn't have to suffer for a while. So, first things first. He looked to the left and right, and then spotted the lake. I will let you know the price of touching other people's things. Chung Myung, at least tell the truth. You are touching its things. It did nothing to us. The disciples of Mount Hua sighed. Here I come! Chung Myung drew his sword and leaped into the pond without delay. Yeah, that sword was cut down. It's fine. Chung Myung descended from the air and waved his hand. Come out, you brat! It was then. There was a very small ripple in the calm lake, and soon the snake emerged, revealing its gigantic size. Its beady black eyes were dotted in red, and its pitch-black scales seemed even more menacing as it looked at Chung Myung. You're dying today. Chung Myung spat on the ground and grabbed his sword as he ran for the snake. The snake also rushed at Chung Myung, hissing aggressively as if it was screaming at him. Chapter 230. Who keeps a dragon in their pond? Yeah! The ink-scaled blood python and Chung Myung rushed toward each other. The sheer speed of both of them was splitting the water to the sides. Flying on water! He's running on water! Running on water! Flying on water. It was a light footwork method that transcended normal techniques. It was one of the highest peaks of footwork techniques, and it allowed the user to run on water. The ability to actually use this in reality required enormous power to facilitate pushing away the water without sinking. Therefore, unless a martial artist was a master, they wouldn't even attempt such a technique. But Chung Myung was making full use of it very naturally. The disciples of Mount Hua clenched their fists. Would it be possible? Baekchun also had a stiff expression. Chung Myung had already failed to catch the snake once. He doesn't have a sword, so what is the point in fighting? This fight was different from a usual battle between warriors. A battle between warriors didn't depend on who wielded the sword better. When using a strong technique against a swordsman, the strength of a technique was important. Ultimately, the one who wielded the better technique would prevail. But that wasn't the only thing that made a difference. A swordsman who used a quick sword could aim for a gap in the techniques of a swordsman who used a strong sword. But it was completely different here. The scales of that snake made swordsmanship meaningless. Even if the sword Chung Myung used was splendid and agile, it was meaningless if the snake's scales could block it. So, the key to winning the battle was knowing whether a sword could even pierce those scales. And if it could, he had to end it in a single blow. Ugh! Chung Myung jumped up and charged at the snake's head. Quack! And then, I will eat you! As if his actions represented those words, he greeted the snake head-on. You brat! Chung Myung looked at it and thought, how dare you treat humans as prey? Chung Myung's feet touched the air. He lifted his body once more, using the air like a stepping stone, and then descended like a meteor right onto its head. Yeah! His broken sword began to shine with blue ki. He felt that the color was getting darker, but before he could completely come to terms with that thought, his ki had already turned purple. That color! Purple! However, the disciples didn't have enough time to be shocked. Chung Myung's sword had reached the head of the snake. Gong! With the sound of a giant bell being rung, the snake's upper body came crashing down after it was hit on the head. Oh? Whoa! Baekchun was shocked. He had just seen the eyes of the snake close in shock. Some might say that snakes have no facial expressions, and some might say that the people who said that snakes had expressions were crazy. But it was clear to Baekchun that this snake had shown some sort of reaction on its face. Did it work? It was far away that he couldn't tell for sure. All Baekchun could make out was Chung Myung wielding the sword once again. Kung! 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 Huh? There are some weird sounds mixed in. Baekchun tilted his head. Of course, he had never heard a snake's cry, so he couldn't tell if the foreign sound was a scream or not. But it was clear that what he had heard now was different than before. No matter how much Chung Myung had swung his sword before, does he really have a chance now? The snake, which had refused to even budge before, was now twisting its body in pain. How dare you! Chung Myung gripped one of the snake's scales with one hand. Ah! It stings! Due to the sharp tip of the scales, his hand was slightly cut. Chung Myung clenched his teeth and circulated ki into his hand. After strengthening his hand with ki, he grabbed onto the scale more tightly. You still won't break, huh? And he went back to striking it down violently. As soon as the black scale was touched by the broken purple sword, its head started moving weirdly. Kya! A completely different scream than before rang out across the forest. Seeing that, the disciples of Mount Hua clenched their fists. He's doing it! Wow, he is doing it! Of course, he hadn't pierced the scales yet, but the last attack definitely felt like a solid hit. And each time his broken sword fell, the snake would twist in pain. Isn't the result the same, regardless of whether it is cut down or beaten to death? Moreover, its huge size, which had been an advantage and source of terror before, was now turning into a weakness. And since it had no limbs, getting rid of Chung Myung was even tougher. Coupled with its screeching cries, the snake continued to twist its body. Stay still, you idiot! Kung! Kung! Chung Myung slammed the snake's head repeatedly without paying attention to anything else. Because of how big it was, his attacks would connect regardless of the snake's desperate movements. In such a situation, Chung Myung was in a dreamlike state. If it was repeatedly hit a couple more times, the snake was bound to fall, even if it would take some more time. It was at that moment. A bright red light shone from the eyes of the snake. The snake let out a tremendous scream and started to rush toward the ground. Huh? And with Chung Myung on its head, it banged itself on the ground. Kong! The shock was so great that a depression was created in the ground. But Chung Myung didn't let go of its scales despite the pain he felt. The eyes of the snake were still shining red. Kwang! 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 It kept doing the same thing again and again. By now, the ground had caved in so much that the trees and rocks were scattered. The disciples all grabbed onto their swords. This time, it seemed like it was really a game of who died first from banging their heads. If Chung Myung couldn't handle this, then they were going to rush in and save him. Baekchun, who saw Chung Myung being constantly hit, ran to one side. No! The purple woodgrass! The purple woodgrass! The snake was preparing to slam itself on the ground again, but the place it chose was where the purple woodgrass was. And if it slammed its enormous body even near that place, not a single herb would survive the collision. Not there! When Baek-chun screamed, even Chung Myung, who was hanging off its scale, flinched. Acha! Chung Myung spread his arms wide to grab the head of the snake, and he tried to reach for the ground. And finally, managing to touch the ground, he held onto the snake with all his might. Chung Myung's feet continued to get plowed into the ground. Even though he resisted, he was the only one getting pushed back. Gradually, a small crater was formed on the ground, and he found enough balance that allowed him to take the lead. Chung Myung, who decided to use all his strength, finally stopped the snake from destroying the purple woodgrass. This... He held onto its huge head and rotated it, making the snake's body twist. Then he kicked it in the face. There is no way I will let things go your way! Gwang! The huge body of the snake turned over and fell into the lake after it was hit by Chung Myung, making the water splash violently. Chung Myung waved his arms as his whole body ached. His whole body felt like a mess, and he had dirt and grass all over him. His gaze fell onto one side, and he noticed that the snake was missing. Bubble. Seeing bubbles at the top of the lake, he realized it. Let's end this. Chung Myung pointed the broken sword towards the lake. As if responding to his action, the bubbles suddenly moved in a circle. Soon, the water began to move, and from it, the snake emerged again. Huh? Chung Myung tilted his head. It looks different. Different? Ah! Chung Myung was shocked. The scales of the snake were now standing upright. Its steel scales that had been protecting its body were now standing up. It was as if it was mocking its opponent by showing off its soft flesh. You look angry. Chung Myung smiled. That is how one should look at their opponent. As if hearing those words didn't sit well with it, the snake let out a scream. It was such a loud cry that anyone who had heard it would have trembled. The disciples of Mount Hua had to cover their ears to bear the scream. With its shining red eyes, it began to rush towards Chung Myung. This was different from before, when it just attacked with its neck sticking out of the lake. Now, it was rushing towards Chung Myung much more aggressively. Thanks to that, more than half of its body was revealed at once. Those who were watching it became shocked as they saw its size. It was so huge that Chung Myung looked like an ant in front of it. But Chung Myung didn't back down. He didn't even take a single step back and just looked at it. He just stared at it with an expressionless face. Will it work? With this body and with this internal key? Well, I don't know, but there's no reason to not try. Chung Myung's eyes looked concentrated and cold. He had crossed his limit again, but that alone was meaningless. Growth was meaningless if one didn't put their life on the line. At the tip of Chung Myung's sword, purple ki began to shine again. It got darker and darker and began to change color again. It was now a bright reddish brown. Then, it became a bright reddish color that resembled the color of the plum blossoms of Mount Hua. That was the color of his sword now. He stared at the snake that was frantically rushing towards him and finally moved his sword. Clench. His hand holding the sword clenched it tighter, and when ki was infused into it, the veins in his hands began to shine and his sword turned crimson. Strength is power. The ki from his donjon was freely swirling around. After the imperiled power of internal ki was activated, it all rushed into his arm that was holding the sword. It felt like his sword would explode at any moment. Feeling that power, he brought down his sword. At the same time, the tip of the sword began to create numerous plum blossom petals. As if branches of plums existed in the air, the plum blossoms began to bloom again. A bright blue light shone in the eyes of Chung Myung as he saw the snake getting closer. Tad! The plum blossoms had now all gathered in one single place. falling plum, blocking river. The infinitely soft petals, which had been gathered, even blocked the flow of the river. The plum blossoms that contained the strength to block everything shot out like a star. Wing! The sound of the plum blossoms moving with immense speed and the sound of the snake coming with reckless wrath to take them down. That sound pierced the ears of everyone around them. Crack! 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 The scales of the snake were literally ripped out in front of this sword technique. It blew away its scales and other fragments of its bodies in different directions. The plum blossoms that still hadn't lost their momentum pierced the snake's flesh. A desperate scream filled the place. With the sound of something exploding, the hard skin of the huge animal began to crack. Red blood flushed out like a waterfall from its head. The dark body trembled, and slowly the red eyes looked at Chung Myung. Chung Myung, whose body was drenched in sweat, looked at the wounded snake. It wasn't perfect. He couldn't fully wield it like he did in the past, but it was important that he was able to unfold it despite the fact that he had done it haphazardly. Time would take care of the rest. Chung Myung coughed 2 times and gently lowered his sword. The snake continued to writhe in pain with the hole in its head as blood gushed out of it. It wasn't just the size of the wound that hurt it. The key on his sword must have ripped through the insides of that snake. As proof of that, wasn't the snake unable to control itself from trembling? I need to finish it, now. It was at that moment. Suddenly, there was a huge splash of water. The snake rushed into the water and then, in an instant, ran to the depths of the lake. Huh? Chung Myung's eyes went wide. It ran away? If it was human, no, it would be tough to consider as a warrior, but since a beast has no pride or honor, it can run away at any time. But Chung Myung, who hadn't thought of it till then, looked at the lake in shock. Chung Myung, you won! The disciples ran to him. Wow, you really took it down. Amazing, Chung Myung, the sword you used at the end. Huh? Jogul, who was talking, tilted his head. Chung Myung. It was because Chung Myung was trembling with his head bowed. When Jogul saw his face, he looked stunned. What he saw was a face that was beginning to lose all reason. How dare you? How dare you run away? Anger was making his face tremble. Are you running away after making people suffer like this? Where did you learn such ignorant things? Where are your business ethics? Why are you expecting business ethics from a snake? It doesn't even have money. Even if it doesn't have money, it at least has an inner core. Inner core! Hand over your inner core! Your inner core! Chung Myung began to run to the lake. Ya, brat, stop him! But they were one step too late, and Chung Myung dived into the lake. My inner core! Plop! And Chung Myung disappeared in an instant to the bottom of the lake. Jogul, who had been watching the entire thing, lowered his head and then asked Baekchun, will he be fine in the water? Baekchun smiled. Just leave him alone. Whether he kills it or whether he dies, I don't care anymore.